OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Bang on 7:30 this Tuesday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Chair Gilroy and Eoin Sheahan with you all the way through until 10. There are a raft of stories for us to get through this morning. There's GAA finances. There is Bill Belichick. There is Tiger Woods. There is the icon that is Brian Cody and his ratification as manager of the Kilkenny Hurlers for another season. We'll talk about all of those a little bit later on. We'll also deal with Manchester United. We've got the depth chart. We're kicking off our Six Nations depth chart in the hope that the Six Nations goes ahead. Keith Wood's going to talk to us about the front row. That's coming a little bit later on. We'd love to hear from you this morning. 087 9 180 180 is the number if you want to WhatsApp us. And apart from all that, Owen, good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, Ger. How are you?
I'm good. You've been granted a screener of the new Tiger Woods documentary.
Yeah, who knows when it's actually going to hit Irish channels, hopefully pretty soon. Seen episode 1, and it's really, really good. I think anybody who's read the book co-authored by Jeff Benedict a couple of years ago, entitled Tiger Woods, maybe isn't going to get as fulfilling an experience out of it as I did. We're going to be joined by Nathan later on, and I was chatting to him about it last night, and he's read the book, and he kind of expected a lot of the detail, which I didn't expect. So I haven't read the book, so I'm getting it all in documentary form for the first time. And anybody who's coming to the documentary without having read the book, maybe just park the book for a while, because I think documentary is a brilliant format to see it for the first time. So there's just a brilliant cast of characters that they have, like people who would have been very close to Earl, to Tiger's father, and his behaviours on and off the golf course when he was trying to help Tiger coming up. Tiger Woods' first girlfriend is interviewed in the first episode, and some of her revelations are incredible, to say the least. And they also have people like Tiger Woods, one of his first elementary school teachers, for example, as well. So episode 1 is all focused on the parents of Tiger Woods and his relationship with Earl. Episode 2 is going to focus very much on what happened during his breakdown in the last 10 years of Tiger.
All right, so that's it. It's 2 episodes.
That's it. 2 episodes, and it pretty much broken up into 2 parts. Even at the end of episode 1, there is a character that's introduced to us just for a second, and then you're like, all right, this is going to be all about Tiger Woods and his philandering. Episode 2, it's pretty evident. Whereas episode 1, there's a lot of archive of Earl, there's a lot of archive of Tiger himself, which you can get online and stuff like that. So none of that is necessarily new. It's the talking heads and what they actually bring. And one of the guys who, as I say, would have known Earl quite well, would have been around him, has a real sense of guilt when he talks about Earl going off with women when he was on tour with Tiger, for example, or traveling with Tiger. And at one point he just says, "I'm sorry, champ," basically enabling this behavior that allowed this child to see what his father was getting up to. So there's all these little nuggets throughout it, which I was certainly getting for the first time, but by all accounts, it's basically like a television adaptation of that brilliant book.
Okay, so there's no golf in it, essentially. Almost no golf.
Almost no golf. Like it does focus in on a couple of moments. For example, Steve Williams is one of the talking heads who pops up quite a bit. So he's probably as much golf as you're going to get. In episode 1, he tells a story, which I know David Walsh told in the Sunday Times at the weekend, about himself and Phil Mickelson on one of the tees in Augusta in 2001. And Phil Mickelson fades his driver off the tee, gets whatever, 300 and something yards. It's a brilliant drive. He's absolutely smug as hell with himself. Tiger steps up with a 3-wood, knocks it way past Phil. And Phil is like, hold on a minute, you hit your 3-wood that long all the time? And Tiger's like, nah, I usually hit it a lot longer. And those sort of psychological moments that he has with his opponent, and very much his opponent on the tee boxes, are really interesting. And I guess that's really kind of hammered into him from his parents. Like, I didn't realize how much his parents kind of looked at Phil and how Tiger really looked at Phil. And they thought to themselves, God, what a disappointment that he was seen as the most talented golfer in the world, and he didn't do with his talent what Tiger managed to do with his talent. And that really frustrated Tiger. So there's all these interesting threads that come from a golf perspective as well, for sure.
So obviously you did a separate podcast when the Michael Jordan documentary came out. Did you come away from the Michael Jordan documentary thinking, okay, I understand and kind of like this guy a bit more than I did beforehand?
Not really, to be honest. There was definitely a bit more understanding, I guess, of Michael Jordan. I wouldn't say I liked him a lot more. I would say I liked his teammates a lot more, for sure. I think a lot of the supporting cast in The Last Dance came out quite well, because I really think that describing that as a Michael Jordan documentary doesn't do The Last Dance service whatsoever. It is the story of that Bulls team, and I think the love for Dennis Rodman in the aftermath was incredible. Like, a lot of people went back and did the foundation reading in the Bad Boys Pistons, for example, after getting the introduction to them in The Last Dance, rather than actually brushing up on Michael Jordan. With Tiger, I think it's probably going to be the same thing. I'd imagine it's very much going to be the same thing in episode 2, when a lot of the obvious things from the last decade and a half start to come to light in that, and they speak to some of the people affected and hurt by it. That's probably where the opinion will change. In episode 1, it's more, God, poor Tiger. There's no way this guy could have been anything but kind of driven into the ground by his parents if he wasn't a top-class, generationally good golfer. That's kind of the feeling you get in episode 1. It's poor Tiger and the child that he was and the way he was moulded.
All right, so you're not in danger of coming away going, Tiger, he's a lovable chap.
I think in episode 2 that's going to change quite a bit. I think in episode 1 you kind of understand why he becomes the person that he is, maybe, without giving him an excuse. They were clear to not give him an excuse, I feel, anyway. And I just think once episode 2 comes out next week, it's going to be a very different story. All
right. Somebody whose career has been in the spotlight a little bit longer than Tiger's is Brian Cody, who last night was ratified for another year as the manager of the Kilkenny Hurlers. There hasn't been the same kind of calls for Cody to go the way there were in Tyrone around Mickey Hart. It's a different scenario. Mind you, we did have Aidan Fogarty on the show saying, look, in any other county, I'm sure they would be calling for Brian's head, but that's not happening in Kilkenny at the moment. Were you surprised that there's been no talk around the ratification, or is that exactly what should happen to somebody with the unbelievable record that Brian Cody has?
Well, I think there shouldn't be much of a conversation around this at all. I think he definitely should have been ratified, but I am surprised that there hasn't been talk about it, because that's what happens, especially over the last few years when they haven't managed to add on another All-Ireland. You would have thought that Kilkenny folk would have got together and thought to themselves, how do we actually win an All-Ireland? Personally, I think Brian Cody's reputation, his history, is enough for him to actually stay on. And I think you can give him a free pass for the last few years, because Kilkenny are nowhere near as dominant as they used to be and aren't the best team in the country, maybe not even in the top 2 or 3 teams in the country at this point. You look at what he's had to work with. They haven't won an under-20, under-21 All-Ireland since 2008, I think. They have won, I think, maybe one minor All-Ireland in the last 10 years. I think they won in 2010, and then they won another minor in 2014, but that's been it. It hasn't exactly been this golden generation like he had in the first half of his Kilkenny managerial career. So people need to stop thinking that he can somehow win All-Ireland whenever he wants to, like he could in the last decade. Hurling has changed. New forces have come to be. You look at Limerick over the course of the last years, they're operating on a different plane. But then you also look at what Brian Cody's been able to do when faced against those brilliant teams of recent years. And it looks like Kilkenny are the team best placed to knock Limerick off their perch with the style of play that they have, with the nous that they have in the sideline. And that nous comes from Brian Cody. If you wanted any inter-county manager going up against Limerick when they're going, I was about to say 3 in a row. It feels like a 3 in a row. When they're going for the 2 in a row next year, you want that manager to be Brian Cody. He is the person you want going up against Limerick, even just from a purely hype standpoint. This is the game that everybody wants to see happen next year. It's what we all wanted to see this year as well. And I think he's probably the guy who might be able to pull it off. So for that reason alone, he deserves another opportunity. And it's not like there's been a huge set of moments where there's just been car crashes from him over the last little while. There hasn't been any evidence that Brian Cody has completely lost his touch as Kilkenny manager.
Okay.
100% he deserves to stay on.
Well, look, we can come back to this a little bit later on, but there have been some rumblings that training sessions have become a little bit straightforward and a bit sterile and a bit boring. That was in a piece in the Examiner yesterday. And maybe one opportunity to change that would be to bring Eddie Brennan in. I know he's got a deal with Coola, but you could easily combine, given that there's going to be split seasons, work with Coola and the Kilkenny team, right? And he's available. He's done an excellent job and clearly knows what he's about. So wouldn't that be the right signing to add to the backroom team? DJ Carey is confirmed, as we heard last week, was stepping away. So there's room there.
And the fact is that we're going to more than likely have a bit of a split season as well next year. Of course, what's happening at the moment could push everything into disarray. But as it stands, it looks like a split season, which would play nicely into the hands of a club manager who could do an inter-county selector job and club manager's job. I know the Coola job is as close to intercounty as you're ever going to get at club level, and I'm sure there's a pre-season to be done, for example, when the intercounty season is happening. So maybe that dissuades him from doing it, but that would be perfect. That is the sort of succession plan that Kilkenny should be looking at the moment, because while I say that Brian Cody is the right man for the job right now, that doesn't mean that he's not going to finish up at some point, or that he is going to stop being the right man for the job in the next few years. And part of that is who is going to be the successor, and identifying that right now should be top priority for Kilkenny.
Or maybe not. Like, I mean, there's 5 or 6 managers who could step in and do that job, and who will all have different approaches. So maybe they don't want to be involved in the setup now, and they want to come with a fresh eye and give everybody the opportunity to do what they want. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving me the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up. Going to do Daniel Harris in a moment. Sports page is coming your way 8:05. Keith Wood at 8:15. Talking about the depth chart in the front row in particular. John Duggan at 8:35. Denise O'Sullivan joining us to talk to us about the Women's League in England, and also the Irish national teams. Just they're licking their wounds, obviously, after failure to qualify for the Euros. And then Deal or No Deal with Nathan. And then talking Trump in golf, and Celtic, who last night conceded a last-minute equaliser against Hibs. It's about right. It's exactly what I think the Celtic fans would have feared would have happened. Now, Phil Egan, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you doing, Ger?
Where are we starting?
Well, we'll start with Brian Cody. Obviously, big news from Kilkenny last night. Going to take charge of Kilkenny for a 23rd season, an 11-time All-Ireland winner with the Cats. And he'll be assisted by James McGarry and Martin Comerford. As you said there, no DJ Carey. Derek Ling will take charge of the under-20s. So with Cody now taking charge again, he's going to match the 23 years that Sean Boylan was in charge of the Meath footballers between 1982 and 2005. Some other news from GAA. Shane Ronayne was confirmed as the new manager of the Waterford senior footballers in a 2-year term. The Cork native was recently in charge of the Tipperary ladies team for 4 years. He stepped down from that role last month. He also won 2 All-Ireland club senior titles with Mourne Abbey. Manchester United and Liverpool will play each other twice in the space of a week. The two rivals due to meet at Anfield this Sunday in a top-of-the-table clash in the Premier League, and the pair will also play at Old Trafford the following week in the 4th round of the FA Cup. The pick of the ties from last night's draw. The draw was also made for the 5th round. United can obviously go top of the Premier League tonight. They play Burnley. A win or a draw will see Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's side replace Liverpool at the top. That game kicks off at 8:15. Also a 8:15 kickoff for the meeting of Wolves and Everton at Molineux. Before that at 6, bottom side Sheffield United, yet to win in the league this season. They did win in the FA Cup over the weekend. They host Newcastle at Bramall Lane. West Ham booked their place in the 4th round of the FA Cup last night with a 1-0 win away to non-league Stockport. Craig Dawson scored the winner for the Hammers, who gave a debut to Dublin teenager Mido Odebeko. Now, West Ham will host Doncaster in the 4th round, but if they win that, they will then face the winners of that 4th round tie between Manchester United and Liverpool. You mentioned Celtic there. Well, they conceded an injury time equaliser at the draw 1-1 at home to Hibs last night. 21 points behind Scottish Premiership leaders Rangers. The champions were missing 13 players last night, and manager Neil Lennon, as they were self-isolating following Christopher Julien's positive COVID-19 test. Julien, who's actually injured, tested positive following the recent mid-season break in Dubai. With the Heineken Champions Cup on hold now, the fate of this season, 6 nations could rest, with discussions being held today. French authorities are meeting to decide their involvement in international rugby. The 6 nations is due to get underway in just under 4 weeks' time. Not good news for the Ireland cricketers. They'll have to wait again for the chance to play the second one-day international against the United Arab Emirates. Today's match, which was rescheduled from Sunday, has been called off again. 4 more UAE players tested positive for coronavirus. And finally, New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick's turned down the offer by Donald Trump of a Presidential Medal of Freedom award. Belichick cited the riot at the US Capitol last week as the rationale behind not accepting that honour.
All right, Phil, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. It is 7:44. That Belichick story broke overnight. Pretty interesting, because you might remember this. Congratulations on a tremendous campaign. You've dealt with an unbelievable slanted and negative media and have come out beautifully. Beautifully. You've proved to be the ultimate competitor and fighter. Your leadership is amazing. I have always had tremendous respect for you, but the toughness and perseverance you've displayed over the past year is remarkable. Hopefully tomorrow's election results will give the opportunity to make America great again. Best wishes for great results tomorrow. Bill. This was the letter that he wrote to Trump in 2016, the night between the election happening and the results being announced where Trump did actually win that election. So Belichick, big supporter of Trump, as was Tom Brady, who had the, I don't know if he actually wore it, he had the Make America Great Again hat in his locker. And Belichick told reporters after that he was friends with people on both sides. He was also, John Kerry was a friend of his as well. And, Kerry and Trump, well, they're diametrically opposed when it comes to politics. But, a big fan of Trump's, and then was absolutely thrilled, apparently, to be getting the Presidential Medal of Honor. So everything that Trump did in between didn't really matter that much. But then what happened at Capitol Hill last Wednesday, that was too much for him. Or, as people were speculating yesterday, will he really accept this? They've got loads of money, and they're going to be looking for a load of free agents. And will free agents want to come and sign for Belichick? Now, perhaps Belichick has had a road to Damascus conversion. Perhaps it's not just, and we should not be purely cynical about this, and he's not being just political. He did say that he had an opportunity during the summer to sit with people in his locker room and to listen to them when it came to the Black Lives Matter movement, and that actually that had a profound impact on his thinking, and it had been a moment of learning and education for him. And, in fairness, everybody needs to be given the opportunity to learn. And he hasn't gone ahead and just taken the Presidential Medal of Honor, despite the fact that he and his family would have seen it as quite a big deal. So it's complicated, Eoin. You can be completely cynical about it. You can hope that maybe if Bill Belichick, at this stage of his life, can learn, then there's hope for all of us in our ability to learn new lessons.
For sure. The idea that it was some sort of road to Damascus conversion, I think, is probably a bit of a reach. I'm sure this year, or last year, it definitely did help people in positions of power to definitely change the way they were thinking, for sure. Whether or not it would have precluded him from accepting a Medal of Honor, though, or whatever specific medal it was, I'm not sure about that, because, as you say, this would have been a massive deal to someone like Bill Belichick, that it might actually be a bit closer to home, that the court of public opinion maybe swayed him a little bit. He was like, God, this isn't going to look good for me. This isn't going to affect my bargaining position too well either. So there might have been a little bit of a selfish aspect to it as well. So probably, all things considered, he was never going to do it, despite the fact that this would have been a massive deal for someone like Bill Belichick. We probably wear it around and tell everybody about it for quite some time afterwards. But this probably does affect him in the off-season a little bit if he does go in and accept it.
It's a lovely image of Belichick with his Presidential Medal of Honor, and not much else on there that you've inserted into people's minds this morning. 7:48, very good morning to you, Daniel Harris. How are you getting on?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
This game against Burnley, occasionally, Burnley have been a thorn in the side of Manchester United. This season, though, this time and this team, this is the moment for Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's group to separate themselves from all of the Manchester United teams that have come post-Ferguson and say, actually, you know what, we're real. So there's quite a lot on the line tonight.
So it's a really big game tonight. The opportunity to go top of the league almost halfway through the season. I think that Burnley give lots of teams trouble when they play well and the other teams don't play well. Last season, United went to Burnley, played really well and won quite comfortably. And if they play like that tonight, then you would expect them to win quite comfortably. But Burnley won't just allow them to get on with it and do it. And I think that Burnley will always kind of be associated with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer because they represent probably the nadir of his time in charge. United lost at home to Burnley just before Bruno started playing, and they've been pretty good ever since. But that home defeat was so bad, and that was really the time. I mean, not the time when people started to wonder, because people have been wondering since the beginning and are still wondering now. But that was pretty much as bad as it got, and since then, United have been steadily improving.
Yeah, I can see why, if he wins tonight, Solskjaer will allow himself to think back on that defeat in front of crowd, when you think about like what the atmosphere was like, the funereal sense, and really to plot his own journey from there to here is fairly remarkable. And you make the point that people are still wondering, do they stop wondering at any point, or does it require a league title before they stop going, actually, you know what, he does have it?
Maybe, and I mean, I think even now, if we won the league title now, people will be saying, well, yeah, lockdown, blah, blah, blah. I mean, ultimately, he probably isn't going to win the league title because there are probably a couple of better teams around. But the thing about that is you only have to play those couple of better teams 4 times. And if you can come out of those games with an all right record, then it ceases to be about that and becomes about what you can do against the rest. I think that United probably learned a few things from their game against City last week, which has some good aspects and some bad aspects. Obviously, the worst aspect is that they lost. And City, it was kind of in some ways quite an immature performance from United in that they defended pretty well and yet still managed to concede 2 goals from set pieces. But I was also going forward that you saw when you play Pep Guardiola teams, you often, if you don't get an early goal and if they're playing well, you've got to be patient because you don't get a lot of the ball. And so when you do have the ball, sometimes I think that there's a pressure to force things because you're concerned about what happens when they get it back. They might score, and also when you're next going to get it back in a decent position. And what happened was United managed to work some pretty decent situations, but instead of taking it one extra pass or waiting until the opportunity presented itself, they went for the killer balls and the shots too early, and they ended up not really creating that much. And I think it wasn't the pressure of playing in a big game exactly, because I don't think you could watch that game and say United didn't turn up. They did. They didn't play as well as City, but it wasn't a no-show. But the thing is that just at those crucial moments, they lacked a little bit of composure, and that hopefully will come. But I think that another way of looking at it will be to say, well, look at the doing they got at home by City at the same stage of the competition last season. They got taken apart, really. I think they were lucky to get away with, was it 3-1 they got away with in the end? And they were quite lucky to get away with that. Could have been a lot worse. Whereas this season, City played really well and United were in the game. And that's not an ultimate standard to be in the game against City. The ultimate standard is to wipe City and everyone else off the pitch. But you couldn't deny the improvement, and you couldn't deny also the improvement in mentality that when City played well, United didn't panic. They just, as I said, they just lacked that little bit of composure in the final third and making the right decisions. And I think one of the things about that was slightly concerning was that it was a bit of a frustrated, tired performance from Bruno Fernandes, who I was surprised to see on the bench at the weekend. Well, not exactly surprised, but I'd hoped that he would just have been sitting at home, because ultimately it's not just about the physical tiredness for a footballer or for any sportsman or for any person who has to go to work, really. It's about mental tiredness, and his performance suggested someone who was just pushed one game too far. And it wasn't just that he couldn't run, it was just that mentally he seemed to be making the wrong decisions, he seemed to be frustrated. He's had a week off now, but in an ideal world, Ole trusts the players that he has enough to not have to play him tonight either, but I'm absolutely certain he'll play him tonight.
Cavani's had a bit of time off as well. Should he play tonight?
Yeah, I think so. I think the only reason you might not see that much of Cavani tonight is that I think he'll be required on Sunday against Liverpool. Because although Anthony Martial is more likely to create a goal out of nothing, I'm pretty sure that Ole will not want a chance falling to Martial. He'll want it falling to Cavani in a situation where its possible chances might be at a premium. And also, one of the things I was talking to a friend about the game yesterday, and one of the things that I thought about also was that when you have defenders, when you have young defenders, and Liverpool, they're going to have Fabinho and they're going to have young defenders, I think they're going to be all right with pace because Fabinho can run, and whoever the young defender is, they're going to be able to run. Whereas Cavani doesn't quite have the same pace that Martial has, but he does have the nous. And when you're playing against a young centre-back, say, and a centre-back who's not really a centre-back but is good at being a centre-back, someone who is constant movement and clever runs and 2 and 3 runs every attack is perhaps harder to deal with. And it actually reminded me of when United used to play Arsenal, when both teams were good. It seems like a lifetime ago. But still, 2019 seems like about 10 years ago, never mind 2003 or whatever. But Alex Ferguson used to quite like playing Ryan Giggs on the right against Ashley Cole because Ashley Cole could match Ronaldo for pace, and he was good enough to have the recovery pace to get back at him when he got beat. But he struggled a bit more with Ryan Giggs, whose movement was a bit cleverer and whose passing was a bit cleverer. And that's why I'd expect to see Cavani start against Liverpool. I think he'll probably start tonight as well. I wouldn't expect 90 minutes out of him, but I think he'll start both games.
When it comes to Edinson Cavani and what he actually brings off the pitch as well, how much are you reading into that? The fact that they have people who are used to winning titles in the dressing room. You look at him, you look at Matic, you look at Juan Mata. This is going to be kind of important if this title race is to be sustained.
Yeah, I think so. It's not just with Cavani and with all the older players. It's not just about players who know how to win, although that's important. It's about knowing how to prepare. It's about knowing how to train, and it's about influencing the other players to become better. Whether it's just with the habits that they see, in terms of thinking about the game, in terms of practice, in terms of how you live your life, but also in terms of the kind of movements that you make. Because what United have is they have Martial, Rashford and Greenwood, who are three really interesting and talented forwards, but none of them quite make a centre forwards runs. You don't see many tap-ins out of them. You see plenty of goals from all of them, although Martial and Greenwood have struggled a little bit this season. But you see a lot of really good goals. You don't see them getting a lot of free goals. And I think that is something that all of them can learn off Cavani, when you should be running front post, when you should be running back post, when you should be following in. I mean, you should be following in all the time, and you should be running front post almost all the time, because that's where you get your goals. I mean, Fergie was very keen on that, telling Mark Hughes that you get your goals at the front post. But I think that there's also those aspects in how a player position that I'm sure there's plenty to learn off Cavani if people got their eyes and their ears open.
We were kind of debating the point last week in the aftermath of the Manchester City game that you mentioned there about the importance of trophies in this journey for Manchester United. Where do you stand on that, on the importance of what, say, an FA Cup at this point would actually bring to the club this season?
Any kind of trophy would be huge. I mean, football as a supporter and as a player, I'm sure, like, football is about those moments. It's about those transcendental moments that you remember for the rest of your life, where there's a particular buzz and excitement, and you don't get that from finishing fourth. It was really important for United to finish fourth last season, and I understand why Solskjaer prioritised that above the FA Cup. I mean, bottom line, he's probably told he had to by his bosses, but in any event, I wanted United to try and win the cup, but I totally understand why they didn't, because even if you forget about the money, in order to take the club to the next level, you have to be seen to be progressing in the league. You have to be competing in the Champions League. And although United aren't in it anymore, the experience they got in the Champions League this season will help them develop, and they produced a couple of really excellent Champions League performances. So you do need to do that, but the days that people remember will be the days that you won trophies. And it also, when you win a trophy, it tells the players that they can win. I mean, Gary Neville has always said that the League Cup United won in 2006 was important as a staging post for that third Fergie great team, because they realised that they could win. And obviously United haven't done that yet. And generally, teams before they win leagues will win a cup or have a season where they go close in the league. It's unusual for a team just to come out of nowhere and win the league. I mean, Leeds did it in '92, but other than that, can't think of too many occasions where that happened. I guess Leicester. But United need to try and find a way. And it's easy to say, well, they've lost all these semi-finals and say, well, therefore they're bottling it on the big occasion. But I don't think it's right to look at those 4 games as a block particularly, because each of them was different. United lost the semi-final to City, and that was before Bruno, and they came within a goal, within a late goal of actually taking that to penalties. So there was that. And then the next semi-final, there was they had the Chelsea semi-final in the cup, and by the time that semi-final came along, the players were shattered, and he rested a few players for that game. And it clearly wasn't a priority. The semi-final against Sevilla was actually, for an hour, was like up there with United's best performances under Ole. And the aspects that caused them to lose that are the reasons why they're losing semi-finals. And I don't think it's because they're bottling them and not turning up. I think it's because they're not ruthless enough going forward. The finishing isn't good enough, and at the back they're not reliable. Like the two ends of the pitch don't quite get the other one out of trouble when they're playing a good team. It's okay when you're playing West Ham and you go a goal down and then you bring on Rashford and Fernandes and you can come back. But it's different when you're playing Sevilla or when you're playing Manchester City. And in those games, you get punished for your mistakes. So you can't get away with missing chances or wasting good attacking situations. And you can't get away with it in particular if you can't be trusted to keep a clean sheet. And that is ultimately the problem with this United team, and something that needs to be resolved. They're capable of playing some really, really good football, scoring some lovely goals, and sometimes defending well. But when they face the better teams, the finishing isn't ruthless enough. You can't get away with wasting 3 or 4 good chances before you score, or after you score, before you score the second goal, which is what happened against Sevilla. And the defending against Sevilla, they gave Sevilla 2 goals that they really didn't need to. And it's about getting more ruthless at both ends of the pitch. It's not, I don't think, about not turning up, because I would say that it wasn't. You could say they didn't turn up against Chelsea. I don't want it to feel like I'm making excuses for them. But when I look at the semi-finals and you take each of them individually, each of them has a slightly different story. But the thing really that links them is impreciseness in defence and attack.
Yeah, but in some aspects, that's the same story the whole way along. They're just not quite good enough yet to be winning those games. And this season, for the last 5 or 6 weeks, it looks like they have everybody who they need to be fit. There is a style and a system that is evolving. There are partnerships that are becoming more bedded in. This is the bit now. From now until the end of the season, we'll be able to judge this Solskjaer team, and it's essentially his team. Like there's no, it's no longer the Mourinho team, and we'll see what happens with Pogba notwithstanding. But these next 5 months are going to tell us the truth about Solskjaer's ability to get good performances in big games from this team.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I think that they still need a couple of players, and I don't think that if you just look at their team and you forget about who the manager is, I mean, you would still look at that team and think it needs a defensive midfield player, it might need a centre forward, don't have a right winger, and those are still things that are required to make this team better. It doesn't look like anything's going to happen in this transfer window, but you wouldn't say that this is a team that is absolutely ready. And it's a team that is improving, and it's a team that can play really well, but it's not a team that's quite there yet. And when you look at the team, the reason why you keep seeing different midfields for different fixtures is because the balance isn't quite right. Because what you've got is at the front of the team, you don't have any wingers. You've got wide attackers, and Liverpool do that. They play wide attackers who need to score goals. United don't really have a right winger at all, but they have wide attackers. But the way that Liverpool offset what you lose from wide attackers is that the fullbacks supply the width, and the way that they get around fullbacks who stay high and wide and supply the width is they don't have a lot of creativity in midfield. They've just got mainly they've got good players, but 3 athletes, which is why Klopp tried to buy Fekir, why he's bought Thiago, to give them a little bit of guile. What United have is they don't have the fullbacks that allow for those wide attackers, and they also don't quite have the midfield. So what you get in midfield is you always have Bruno, obviously, but if you play with a number 10, which is more or less how Bruno plays, who doesn't have a lot of defensive responsibility, to balance that, you sort of need 2 runners. So in the big games, it's usually Fred and McTominay. Except if you play with Fred and McTominay, then you're saying that almost all the creation has to come from Bruno. So if Bruno doesn't have a good game, or if the opposition put 2 men on Bruno, or stop Bruno struggling to create. And the balance of that isn't quite right, because what you've then got behind it is you've got a defence that isn't quite reliable. So that's the other reason why you see Fred and McTominay playing a lot of the big games. And so it does still need some tweaks. And I mean, it needs one more midfield player, I think, an upgrade on Fred and McTominay. If Pogba leaves, it may even need another one, depending on what the plan is for Van der Beek. Not sure. So, as a long answer to the question, that we will learn a lot about Solskjaer from the next 4 or 5 months, because you learn a lot about any manager in that time. But I don't think this team is quite ready yet. But it's not inconceivable that they would manage to pull off something good before they were quite ready.
Yeah, and I get why the downplaying of chances is happening from a Manchester United perspective, but surely you won't be in this sort of form this time next week if they've just beaten Burnley, if they've not got beaten by Liverpool, got 4 points from the next 2 games. Surely at that point your tone has changed a little bit and you're saying this thing has a real chance of happening.
I mean, it has a chance of happening now. Obviously, if they win the next 2 games, it'll have more chance of happening because they'll have 6 more points. But it won't change what I think about this team and where I think this team has it in its stage of development. Like nothing, I don't think I can see anything in the next week that's going to make me reevaluate my opinions about Fred and McTominay, who I think are useful players. But I think that in order to get to a team that starts winning the big trophies, you probably need someone slightly better than both of them, at least one player slightly better than both of them. And I'm not going to change my opinion about that. But if United do get 6 more points, and they would be in a position where they had good momentum, and they are good enough to get enough points in the remainder of their games to go close to winning the league title. But they're probably not as good as Liverpool and Man City. And to win the league when there are 2 teams who seem to be better, it's unusual, but it's probably not unprecedented, because ultimately, when a team wins the league, obviously the best team wins the league, because the league is a metric to measure which team has played best in the league that season. And so you wouldn't say at that point that the 2 teams that were better than them had played better than them in the league that season, but you might say that Liverpool and City have a better top level than United do, even at that point. So it might happen, and if they win the next 2 games, it will be more likely to happen. But no one is not gonna convince anyone that this United team is quite there yet and suddenly doesn't need the key players that that Liverpool and City don't quite need. Because it's interesting with City, actually, because I don't think that this team is as good as the team that won the consecutive league titles, but they might be more dangerous in some ways, and certainly more dangerous in Europe, because if you put the players that they have going forward in front of a defence just behaving in a sensible manner, then you have a team that looks to me to be more likely to win the big games against the best teams. So if City now look like they've got a bit of momentum too, and they know what it takes. So I think that Jurgen Klopp will be starting to be concerned, and he'll be much more concerned about City than he'll be concerned about United.
For sure. One story that we just wanted to get your take on, see exactly, Roy Keane has been linked with, or it has been reported that he's interested in getting back into the day-to-day of football management. He had previously been linked with the Azerbaijan job, then Azerbaijan ended up in Ireland's group. So we're all very, we're disappointed maybe that didn't happen. Where in the league would Keane realistically be considered for a manager's gig? What level at the moment do you think?
I'm not sure. I think that people, to some extent, I don't know if they underestimate Roy Keane as a manager, but most managers fail in most jobs that they take. And almost every manager gets fired from the jobs that they take. And Keane had showed some potential. I think people forget what a good job he did at Sunderland, where he took them from, I think, they're in the bottom three of the Championship. Yeah. And he took them from the bottom three of the Championship to a Premier League team. And a lot of that, I'm told, was because by people who I know who watch Sunderland, a lot of that was clearly because of the stuff that Keane was doing. There's become this desire to do him up as a proper football man who doesn't believe in coaching and doesn't believe in tactics. And I don't really think that's true. Like, do you remember early in the season on Sky, he had like a row with Tim Cahill, where Tim Cahill was saying that Arsenal knew why they were losing, so it was all right while they were losing, and United were a mess. And then obviously we saw what happened after that. And Keane was talking much more about talent and mentality. And I think that he's right about that. I think the problem with Roy Keane is perhaps the problem with Jose Mourinho also, is that he doesn't tolerate particular kinds of personality and traits. And when you're managing a team, you have to tolerate all the people that you have who might be able to be good for you and you might be able to get something out of. And I'm not sure that Roy Keane has necessarily worked out how to speak to everyone all of the time. Like his media reputation, and in fairness, like the reputation that he plays up to, almost as a pastiche of himself. I mean, there's a book, Bret Easton Ellis writes a book called Luna Park, and it begins with a line, "You do a very good impression of yourself." And I often think about that when I watch Roy Keane on television. You do a very good impression of yourself. But I think he's in on that particular joke, but I don't think it does a lot for his reputation and for if he wants to get back into management, for that bid to get back into management. But what he needs to do is he needs to develop a way of talking to different kinds of personality, because when you've got a football team, it's rare for you to have a particular kind of personality that is dominant. Mourinho had it at Chelsea the first time, but he hasn't had it really at any club since Inter, and I think that's why he struggled. And if Roy Keane can somehow assimilate that not everyone is like him and not everyone is like anything, then he might have the nous and the ability to inspire. Because whatever people say, when you talk to people that know him personally, they'll tell you that Roy Keane is a top bloke and he is kind. Not all the time. There'll be just as many stories of him not winding people up, but him treating people in a way that, if you're trying to get a tune out of them, is often unwise. But when I hear him talk about football, I still look at him and I think you have the capacity to be inspirational. The question is whether he's learning, and people tend not to change that much. So he might need a particular circumstance to be successful, but I wouldn't say it's impossible for him to be successful.
Are you talking about a championship club, or actually should he stop thinking about that and only ever try and get a big club where the players are going to respect the fact that he's asking them to have the mentality of winners?
I don't think it would. It doesn't matter necessarily. I mean, I think he's shown that he has the ability to do a good job in the Championship because he did one. But I think him persuading someone to give him a job in the Premier League at this point seems quite unlikely. So it might have to be a Championship club. But where you get a set of personalities who respond to Roy Keane in the right way, you don't know where that's going to happen, or where he would have the freedom and the money to be able to assemble what he needs. I mean, if he even knows what he needs. I mean, he when you watch him on telly, you can see that he has some self-knowledge. So he does probably know what he's after, but managing is hard, and as I said, most managers fail in most jobs. So I wouldn't. Maybe he needs to be with someone else, or with someone who can be the good cop to his bad cop, or with someone who's a good coach. Hard to know what kind of coach he is. I think that when he was at Sunderland, I think people felt that his game management was quite good and his coaching of players from the touchline was good. But management is such an enormous, sprawling job, and it's hard to speak with like huge expertise about what Roy Keane does because we don't know. Yeah. But he did do a great job at Sunderland that time.
All right, Daniel, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
No, see you again, lads.
Daniel Harris, give me some thoughts on Man United Burnley tonight. We'll obviously be talking about that on tomorrow's show as well. 0879 180 180 if you've got thoughts on where Roy Keane could end up as a manager, or indeed if Manchester United are going to win tonight and how things are going for them there. It is 11 minutes past 8. Packed show still to come. We've got Irish star Denise O'Sullivan joining us just before 9. We're talking Brian Cody with John Duggan, and we're back after these with Keith Woods front row on our Irish Rugby depth charts.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
Jamie caught Frank with quite a bad challenge, and the physio was patching him up, and Les Seeley, his turned to Frank. He went, "Frank, get back on and do him good and proper." He said he took a liberty there. He said, "Make sure you leave it on him good and proper." And I'm stood there, I'm thinking, oh, hang on, he's talking about him doing this ain't right, you know.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. For the first time ever, bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest game of the week right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. The world's best-selling plug-in hybrid is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See mitsubishimotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Let's start with the papers at 13 minutes past 8 this morning. OTB Sports, attention isn't worth an F if you can't do it out on the pitch. This is Ron Dwyer speaking with Arthur James O'Dea. His Laker Gale is on, I think, this week, tonight or tomorrow. Brian Cody to take charge of Kilkenny for a 23rd championship year, or is it a 24th? A 24th season, a 23rd championship year. John Fogarty's done the numbers and come up with 24 on that one. Celtic didn't read the room. Celtic's COVID mess and the futures of Lennon and Duffy. Trump is them and they are him. Donald Trump's relationship with PGA Tour golfers. Yeah, they can't all pretend that they weren't playing golf for them now. It's like we've taken names and we've got the facts and figures on that. The Examiner this morning, Coonan, GAA must revise funding to help rural counties. He's making the point that the amount of cost that is involved in travel for inter-county teams diminishes the amount that they can spend on coaching and is therefore unfair. So some extra funding needs to be put in place for the GAA to counterbalance that. He thinks that amalgamating counties is more likely to happen than splitting Dublin as well. And as I said, it's a 24th season according to the maths that John Fogarty's doing, and he might be right. So the Independent this morning, calls grow for leagues to be scrapped with GAA facing loss of 17 million for 2021. This is the 2021 loss we're talking about now. Some treasurers have expressed the view that the football and hurling leagues should be shelved for the year because of costs, a move that could gain momentum anyway if the public health picture does not improve in the coming weeks. So it is all up for grabs with regards to the GAA season. And there's Shane Duffy on the field last night when Hibs scored their late equaliser, and the Six Nations are meeting the French authorities in a bid to save the tournament. Still, the French seem relatively confident that is going to go ahead. The Joy Division, banned. Mass celebrations to be punished and new clampdown on social distancing. The scenes in the FA Cup were reminiscent of the county final scenes that we saw around the country. And no doubt there were some shebeens right across England that were being active late into the night as various underdogs won around that. Six Nations fears as European rugby is shut down. Interesting stuff in the Times about what the reconstituted European Cup might look like at this point. They're saying that a revised Champions Cup format could follow a temporary suspension, and that it would mean that we'll go straight through to a round of last 16, which will be knockout. And that would mean that Ulster and Connacht will miss out, and they will both go into the Challenge Cup as the top-ranked teams in the Challenge Cup. So Leinster in this, they have the fixtures. I think he did have fixtures at one point. So yeah, here it is. That's it. Toulouse, Edinburgh, Munster Scarlets, and it would be Leinster versus Gloucester. So that would be what the story is if that happens, and that would be disappointing, but at least there'll be a competition on.
Yeah, I think that probably the way the competition's been already this season has probably killed a little bit of people's enthusiasm for it. The fact that, I guess, coming into the latter stages of the pool, not having those last gasp possibilities to actually get out of the pool probably killed it for a lot of people. This would obviously kill it a little bit further, but it would be a shame that, say, for example, that Claremont result for Munster, if that were to be for nothing, that would be a real shame.
Yeah, well, at least they'll survive in the competition. They'll still be alive at the knockout stage, which is all you need. Now, it's 16 minutes past 8. It is time for us to assume, briefly, that the competition will go ahead, and to look forward to our depth chart and to see exactly where we are at the moment. I'm delighted to say Keith Wood joins us to look at the front row. Keith, how are you?
Good morning, Ger. I'm excellent, thank you. Really good. How are you?
Good. The front row is a situation where we've had a lot of strength in recent years, and then all of a sudden players reach that back end of their careers and we begin to get worried. So how strong a front row do we actually have at the moment, do you think?
I think we have a decent front row. We have a little bit of a gap in a couple of spots, and our depth chart, I think, is relying on players coming back from injury, actually, to put us into a strong position. So I think we're okay, but it's funny, at different times, you said it a few years ago, we seem to be incredibly strong and have plenty there, and always with a doubt at tight head who was coming up behind Tadhg Furlong. That has changed somewhat, but maybe not for another year when we see some of the guys that we have in our chart coming through. But it's one of those interesting points where if you get one or two injuries, you can seem very shallow in what you have in terms of quality, because we have only 4 teams in Ireland, and we are trying to make certain that we have enough of players playing all the time. But to get good at anything, you need to play. But to get good in the front row, you really need to learn during match time, and because it can be make or break of an awful lot of games, you tend to stick with the same guys all the time. You tend not to rotate them quite as much. I think Andrew Porter is the perfect example of that, where he definitely struggled in a couple of big games, and then because he has had to play every moment, you've seen him get much better. You've seen him, like, I presume in the front row you suffer badly until you learn how to cope, and then you just, because you've learned how to cope, you're over a hump. I think I may have said this before, but I played, when I was 18 or 19, I played Junior Cup for Eoin, and we played against Thomond Rugby Club, and there was a guy, Duggan, I think, was the tight head, and I was at hooker, and he absolutely killed me. We played 3 times that year. He absolutely killed me in the first match. He killed me in the second match, and in the third match, I managed to be fine. I'd learned how to deal with him, and he was a very crafty. He was, like, I was 18, he was 33 or 4 maybe, and he knew exactly what to do and how to put me under pressure. But I figured it out before the end of the year, and it just takes a period of time to do that. When Porter came on, he got screwed in a few games actually, and he got screwed in a lot of scrums over the first 10, 15, 20 games he played. That's fine, it isn't just him. It has to be the rest of the pack have to look after that guy, because he's then proved how resilient he can be, how good he can be. And he's at the top of the chart at the moment. Now, the reason for me he's top of the chart is because Tadhg Furlong has been injured and laid off for quite a while. So I don't quite know where he is. But I would have him always there, because as soon as he gets back, he's going to get very close to that jersey, because he is a class act.
That's the thing, isn't it? That we've seen enough now. And so just to labour the point one last moment on Furlong, he's still only 24. I did Google his age there.
On Porter.
On Porter. He's still only 24. Like, you know, the amount of rugby that he's now played, we're going to have a massive benefit for. It means that when Furlong does come back, you've no doubts about taking Furlong half here and a half there, and they can both be explosive for those halves.
Look, the way the game has moved, you're looking to get 50 minutes from your first tight head and 30 minutes for your second one. And personally, I'd like that to change. I'd rather a guy stayed on for longer, and that if there was a reduction of the subs, that would happen. But no, I don't have any fear for him whatsoever. And it's, again, he's now got used to the game. He's got used to how difficult it is. What he needs to be able to do is not give away as many penalties. He still gives away a few penalties at different times, not just at scrum time, but at play around the field, because like tight head is the toughest place to play. All the pressure of the scrum still goes through the tight head. It is unbelievably fatiguing. So as he gets older, at 24, he's going to get better and better. And what we want to do, I've said this for a lot of different players, we want him playing for another 7 or 8 years, you know, so we want to get the most out of him, for him and for us. So if we can tidy up some of the discipline things, which are, in my view, a bit of fatigue, because you get your head up from a scrum and you're rushing to the next thing, and you may be walking because it looks, you know, you're rushing, but you're only able to walk because you're almost shortened by every scrum. So you can be very fatigued. So that's a part he needs to tidy up. Okay, well, let's look at we've got some graphics for these. So the loose head, we've got Cian Healy is in first position, Dave Kilcoyne second, Ed Byrne is third, and your next gen is Eric O'Sullivan. So was this close? For me, Cian Healy still is, I mean, I think he's almost on the point of keeling over, actually, but he has been like that for years, and his performance is still incredibly good. Dave Kilcoyne, again, has been injured, but I find he gives us something different. He's a powerful carrier. He's got a great bit of gas. He got a good bit fitter, I think, in the last year. Ed Byrne, and I've James Cronin in as well. That's my addendum this morning. That he has started playing an awful lot better as well. I'm not worried at loosehead. I think we seem to be doing okay. Look, I just think, for me, I'd like Cian Healy and Dave Kilcoyne, and you could start either depending on who you were playing against, because it depends on what exactly you're looking for. But Cian Healy is a warrior, you know, of the highest order. What he has actually been able to, from the injury he's come back from, to still be able to play the way he is. Though at times I worry for him. He looks so shattered when he's on the field, because like some of the matches we've seen over the last period of time, it's an attritional place to play. Like, front row is bloody tough. Yeah, okay, so you're relatively confident that strength and depth is going to be fine to get us over the course of the tournament, assuming again it goes ahead. Let's move on. Let's move on to hooker, because this is where things get interesting. I think we've got Rob Herring is the man in possession. Ronan Keller is second. Dave Heffernan is third, and next gen is Dan Sheahan. Yeah. Look, there's other guys there. There's Kevin O'Byrne in Munster, Scannell in Munster, though I just don't think he's played particularly well. He's not as effective around the field. We're just not seeing a huge amount of him. Rob Herring, for me, is the standout. I think we're struggling a bit since Rory Best. And as we said at the time, Rory Best stayed on too long. And partly for that happening, it takes away some of the opportunity for other players that come afterwards. And I think Ronan Keller, for me, still is the right guy. I think he's a couple of flaws in his throw, and he needs to sort those out pretty quickly. Dave Heffernan's had a few chances, and at times he's been good. At times he hasn't been as industrious as you'd want from your hooker, and as accurate as you want. Dan Sheahan, we've seen very, very little of, and but he's a big beast of a young fella with his socks around his ankles. He's kind of almost Muck Savage hooker, and he's not that, you know. But he's a very good ball carrier. So it's trying to see what we have for this period of time. I would be looking at him tightening up his skills and becoming part of an Irish team in the next year to 18 months. But for me, I'd like to see it as close as you possibly can, because we're not for a long period of time, we've had like really good hookers going back to Jerry Flannery and Rory Best and Sean Cronin, all doing different things for the Irish team. Like Rob Herring is there, but I think that's a position that's up for grabs.
You mentioned Ronan Kelleher's throw there, Keith. How does he improve that? Is it practice? Can he tap into maybe some of Paul O'Connell's expertise, like in terms of where he should be throwing, in terms of the line out? How much of that comes from the coaching? How much of that comes from yourself?
Yeah, I think an awful lot comes from yourself, but if you can get someone to do a harsh, critical analysis of his throw, he drifts off his throw to the right at times. Some of it can come down to stance. I know that the convention now is to move to a square stance to throw. I think that's very good for a thrower, but it's not very good for a scrummager, because you're trying to throw using some of the flexibility in your lower back that often diminishes as a game goes on from scrummaging. It's then having the certainty of throwing where you know they're going to be. So I think our line out in Ireland has struggled since Devon Toller left. Partly because he's a giant and it's an awful lot easier to throw the ball to a huge guy in the middle of the line out. But some of the throws are very, very flat from Kelleher, and he doesn't have to be that flat. So he has to build an arch into his throw so that it'll land on the player rather than cut through the air, because if any of that timing is off, you can often see balls fly over the back of the line out. So, but that's understandable because he's young, he's still young. So and people would say, well, surely it must be easy to be able to learn how to throw. You just stand and throw at a point of the wall. Throwing at a point of the wall is perfect for throwing at a point of the wall, but there's a huge amount of nuance and line out. Sometimes you're gauging it to where the player is and the players around him. So you might put extra arc on the ball to get over a guy. You'll only learn that from playing and training and playing with the top players all the time. But when you're saying practice, provided your throw is pure, you practice. If you have a flaw in your throw and you're practicing the flaw, and that flaw comes out under pressure. So you want to make certain that whatever kinks are in the throw have been solved out, and you learn a whole variety of different throws. I mean, I had the great pleasure of starting with Brent Anderson, a New Zealand player. He played 4 times for New Zealand. He played with Gary Eoin. He treated me really badly because I didn't hit him with the ball often enough, and he forced me into practicing so many different types of throws. But even as a 2-jumper, he had variations on how he wanted to jump and where he wanted to jump and the pace of the ball. And it ended up, you had to force your way into thinking that I don't need 1 throw, I need 10 throws. And there's a joy in learning all the different nuances. Of course, a joy I often got wrong, but it's still one that you want to try and get right.
We have goalkeeping coaches, and we have very specialised coaches in every single sport. Do we have throwing coaches? I mean, I know there's a forwards coach, and I know there's a scrum coach, but presumably the scrum coach isn't looking after the line-out thrower as well, is he?
No. And in fact, Jerry Flannery was brought over as a line-out throwing coach, I think originally for Quins. I think his remit has spread a bit more. And there was a guy with an incredibly pure throw. So he had a couple of flaws, but actually his throw and the dynamic of his throw was incredibly fluid. So I still think he's the best line-out thrower I'd seen. Especially before he injured his shoulder. He struggled a little bit after a shoulder injury, but that's one of the issues. It's a big skill, and they're it was so frustrating when you're having. Sometimes you just go into the total shockers with your lineouts, and you're standing inside in the gym, and you'll see the guys, and they'll all throw the ball, and they'll hit the spot on the wall. If it was only that simple, and you'd have the kind of competitions at the end of training, and sure you'd lose, and that's your bread and butter. So, I think it needs to be looked at a little bit more. I often think when things change that they change because they suit somebody, but they don't necessarily change for the better. So I'm still not entirely certain of the straight on throw. I think it leaves you very little ability for adjustment if something happens in your eye line, and it's very hard to adjust if you're halfway through a throw. So I think there is a need for a technical skills coach, but I think any skills coach should be able to do it. They have to just practice on it themselves. But I think there's ways of looking at it, how your hand finishes. I mean, where your hand cocks behind your head when you throw the throw, where your hands finish and the line in which they finish. And it sounds it's hard to explain that on radio, but even for this. But if your hands finish there, which if you can see that down the screen, they go straight. If your hand finishes there, the ball drifts off to the right.
Yeah. Well, you think, I mean, it's a repeatable skill. Grand, the pressure is going to increase if it's a defensive 5 metre line or an offensive 5 metre line with the game on the line. Fair enough, the pressure will ramp up and the psychology is important to it too, but it's a single repeatable skill that, or maybe it's a multiple repeatable skill that you learn.
It is a multiple. It's definitely a multiple. But also, you'll often hear commentators say, can't believe you threw the ball to the back, that's the hardest throw. It often isn't the hardest throw. It's the one to the front is often the hardest throw.
Because it's being defended better, is that it?
Correct, because it's been defended, because if there's a delay in a guy getting off the ground, it can put it under huge pressure. You can throw the ball. If you throw the ball to 17 metres, it means the lineout's over for one, because it's gone over 15 metres, but there's nobody behind it to catch it. So if you can throw that ball comfortably, that's an easy throw. It just depends on the person. If you're trying to thread a needle in the middle of the lineout and you have two sets of jumpers, or in some teams you will have two pods of jumpers and a very tall second row who jumps on his own, which effectively means it's like three jumpers. Or in the days of John Hayes, he would lift Malcolm O'Kelly on his own. So you could have three pods lifting against the opposition. That becomes incredibly difficult. So it depends where you are in the field. Again, I heard something the other day, why would you throw the ball over the back of the lineout? Well, if you're 5 yards from your own line, your guys who are running onto that ball only have 5 yards to go, the opposition have 10 yards to go. That's an easy throw.
Yeah, and look, that's the type of stuff that I think a lot of time gets lost in the immediate second where the incident happens. Let's do tighthead before we wrap this up. So we've already talked about this. Andrew Porter is ahead of Tadhg Furlong. John Ryan is third, and the next generation, Kenyon Knox of Munster and Roman Salanoa of Munster as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen enough of the two guys, the two other guys, and that is an issue. I think they need to get a bit more game time, but for me, Porter, Furlong and John Ryan, I'm comfortable with all of those playing a Six Nations game. I think they can all do a very good job, especially because we're looking at playing a half. That's each player playing the bones of a half. Keane Knox, we've seen a little bit from. Roman Salanoa came off the bench 2 weeks ago. I thought it pretty impressive, actually. So the first chance you really get to see him, he is a big bear of a man. He gets himself into a very good position, and the scrum doesn't move an inch. That's great, because those first days are very frightening when you're in there, because you don't quite know whether you're going to be up to scratch. You might be up to training, but white hot games make things very, very different. So, but they're the ones not for this competition, but for in the future to look.
Okay, there's lots of suggestions coming through on our Instagram comments box as well. Dan Sheehan's brother Bobby is a unit, 6'5", 110 kilos, 20 years old. Conan O'Donnell, get him back from Crusaders in New Zealand, and a lot of love for Porter at the moment. But a lot of people wondering about Furlong too. I guess what have you done for me lately? But Tadhg Furlong is Lions quality and world class. So Irish rugby needs Tadhg Furlong back to the absolute peak level that he can get to. And again, he's only 28 too, so there's no reason why he wouldn't get back there.
I think in my own view, I thought he got too heavy in the last year, and I'd like to see him more mobile. I know he needs to be big and solid, but he has world-class capabilities, and I'm sorry, what has he done for us lately? He's done nothing. He's been injured. Injury is part of rugby. You want that guy back on the field whenever you get the chance.
One last thing I just wanted to bring up, the eSportif Intelligence, they do an annual survey on, come out just on New Year's Eve, the highest paid players in France and England were the 10s in the Celtic League. In the Pro 14, it was the second rows, and its tight heads are the only ones in the front row who appear at the top of the order, whereas the hookers are the worst paid in the Pro 14 and the top 14, and second worst paid in the Premiership.
Well, I was always trying to tell people I was underpaid, you know, but yeah, it's changed. Hookers used to be much further up. Tight heads were always at the top of the tree. It's that difficult to position. And what's become increasingly more important as the game has become more professional is not just your tight head, but your tight head lock. The ability to have a big bruiser to make certain that your scrum is solid. So, you know, if your scrum starts dissolving and you have a good kicker opposite you who's well paid, he's going to bang over every kick. So a powerful scrum means a huge amount. A goal kicker means a huge amount.
Keith, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Pleasure. Cheers, lads.
Keith Wood giving us his depth chart ahead of the Six Nations we hope will go ahead. A reminder about what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio today. Bernard Brogan podcast. It's a special bonus pod reflecting on season 1 with Bernard. That's live from 12 o'clock. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is the life and times of Johnny Kilbane, who was the longest tenured world champion, an ACL man who ended up in Cleveland. Dadcast at 3, Mount Rushmore at 4 is Galway, and then from 6 o'clock it's OTB Gold. Barry Ryan is the author of The Ascent, the cycling book. Well worth your time. That's all on OTB Sports Radio today from 12 o'clock. You can listen to us now and every morning as a radio show if you want. Just go onto the OTB Sports app and click Listen Now, and you get a live continuous feed of top quality sports programming, including OTB AM and the evening show, and that's definitely the best place to listen to us. We're going to speak with Denise O'Sullivan around about 8:45. We've got Nathan Murphy coming your way just after 9, looking at the new Tiger Woods doc, and then deal or no deals. As we, you know, there's been no deals. It has been a winter of no deals, Eoin.
I don't think many people expected a lot of deals to be happening this year. I think everybody was like, oh no, the pandemic's here, no money's going to be spent back in the summer. And then everybody spent all their money that was actually their rainy day fund, and now they've got nothing left to spend. And also, I guess it actually makes a big impact that Manchester United are going relatively well, because they seem to be the fuel that tends to run the transfer window a little bit. The people who investigate the gossip that is always correct. There's no investigation to be done anymore. Manchester United are going to win the Premier League. So there's what they actually come up with is no signings required. Liverpool have been pretty straight up about the fact that they're not going to splash out and that they have injuries coming back. It's basically hard to make up any gossip right now about any Premier League teams.
Any credible gossip. I mean, we'll try, but credible gossip is always the magic bit. 8:38 this morning, OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good mornings. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We're going to get John Duggan's thoughts on the Brian Cody situation. Just to recap it, Brian Cody was, yeah, we've got John Duggan now there, I think. He was ratified again for another year, and it kind of has passed largely without comment. John, what's your take on the Cody situation? Obviously one of the greatest managers of all time. Nobody disputes that.
No, but I'm just wondering, should you go out at the top if you want to be... should you go out like Ferguson? Ferguson quit after 13 Premier League titles in 2013. Should you go out that way? Does it matter if you don't go out that way? Because I can't see Kilkenny winning the All-Ireland Championship in 2021 based on what I've seen over the last few years and what I saw in the semi-final against Waterford. GJ Kerry's left. There are no new faces in the backroom team. James McGarry, Martin Comerford, continuing with Brian Cody. Look, it's very hard to argue against the most successful manager in the history of Gaelic games, but I'm just wondering, has he got another All-Ireland in him? And if he does, is that then the time for him to go out at the top? Because it's just a case that after 23 years, do you get to a situation where there is a degree of diminishing returns, even if you're the best of all time?
Well, when would have been that moment that has been the sort of apex for him over the last little while then? If you had the benefit of hindsight, John, where would have been the top for him to go out? Would it have been the last All-Ireland win if you had your time back, if you were Brian Cody?
I think it would have been the last All-Ireland win, or possibly the 2014 win, when they had maybe the greatest game of all time against Tipperary in that drawn game, and then they went and won the replay. It was Henry's last appearance. There were a lot of players calling it quits then. And actually to win it the following year was an amazing achievement because you had so many players of that golden generation that were gone. Look, you don't become a manager who wins 43 trophies without having a bit of obsession about it, being a hopeless addict. And Brian Cody is that. And that's why they've won so many titles. But they haven't won one now. It'll be 6 years. And if you look at the pecking order, you have to think that Limerick are ahead of them, that Galway are ahead of them, and that Waterford are ahead of them. So, yeah.
But sorry, John, but like, if you're saying Galway are ahead of them in the pecking order, they've managed to take off Galway this year, and they managed to win the last year. They managed to win the Leinster Championship last year. Would you say that's kind of like a slight overachievement from this Kilkenny crop, a sign that Brian Cody can still provide the magic? And like if you go back to the previous season, then that Limerick game, and I would still maintain that this Kilkenny team can beat Limerick if they played a perfect game. There have been moments, John, over the last 2 seasons where you're like, this guy's still got it.
Moments, but have Kilkenny really pushed anybody close in the All-Ireland final since 2016? No. They were hammered by Tipperary twice. Now, one of them had mitigating circumstances with Richie Hogan sent off. But like last year, they didn't play well for 70 minutes in any of the games last year. Against Dublin in the second half, against Galway in the first half, and against Waterford in the second half. And they got caught for that reason. Galway were under their new manager for first season, Shane O'Neill. And I think from a talent point of view, I still think they ran Limerick closer than anybody else this season. I think the Limerick-Kilkenny game from 2019 was just Limerick being completely caught on the hop in the first half, and Limerick were asleep. If I was investing in shares, I would not be investing in Kilkenny hurling, because I don't think, like, when you think about Kilkenny hurling and match winners, who are you thinking about? You're thinking about TJ and Richie Hogan, who are match winners going back 10, 15 years. I don't see the young, who's the new Eddie Brennan, who's the new Aidan Fogarty, who are the young players, and especially in the forward line. They have the work rate, they have the hunger, they have the intensity. They're probably maximising everything they have under Cody.
Exactly.
But that's still not good enough to win All Ireland.
Well, that's a different thing. Like, is it not then fanciful to think that they should be the best team?
This is all about winning All Irelands.
But they don't have the resources. Like you just said it there, the players there aren't actually as good as the generation that are now aging, the TJ Reid and Richie Hogan era. This generation that has come through, I was mentioning it earlier on, they haven't won an under-21 championship in ages. They only managed to, well, in fairness, they did win 2 minors, 2010 and 2014, in the last decade that we've just seen. But outside of that, John, it's not like they have a Limerick-type group. They possibly don't even have a Wexford-type group, or maybe even a Clare level of player that came through in the middle of the last decade. That I think Brian Cody is close to maximising what we've seen from Kilkenny, and that, of course, he will hold his hands up and say the second half collapses last season were bad. They were very bad. They almost got caught by Dublin. Let's not forget in the Leinster Championship. But I just think that maybe these are two very different things. The idea of, are we getting diminishing returns from the manager, or actually is this generation not what it once was?
Yeah, and you're only going to know when somebody new comes in. So if Henry Shefflin comes in after winning 2 Club All-Irelands at Ballyhale Shamrocks, and then they win at All-Ireland, is it down to Henry? Is it down to freshness? Is it down to the work that Cody did? You don't know the answer to that. I suppose the question I'm only asking is, should top managers go out at the top? Or should they just go when they feel like, we've done everything that we can? And maybe Cody is laying the groundwork for the next generation. But I just don't see Kilkenny winning the All-Ireland this year. But maybe that's, as you say, not a reflection on Brian Cody. But should freshness be a thing in GAA? Should Mickey Hart have gone sooner than he should have? Should Sean Boylan have gone sooner than he should have? Should Arsene Wenger have gone sooner? Is it up to us to decide that should be the case? But I suppose that's why we have these talking points, and that's why we ask the question. You can't ask the question in 2015 that Brian Cody, if he rides off into the sunset, all political careers end in success or failure, generally failure. But I suppose the only reason we're asking the question is because he hasn't reached the level of, there's been a bit of a drought, which is unusual for him.
All right, what else is happening, John?
Well, the Bill Belichick thing is interesting. I definitely think, obviously there's so much happening in regards United, Liverpool drawing each other in the 4th round of the Cup. The fact that the Champions Cup in rugby is, probably going to be put back until April. The Six Nations organisers are meeting the French today. I still think the Six Nations is going to be okay. But Bill Belichick turning down the offer by Donald Trump of a Presidential Medal of Freedom Award, citing the riot at the US Capitol last week as the rationale behind not accepting the honour. This is the statement that he released, the quotes from it. Recently, I was offered the opportunity to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which I was flattered by out of respect for what the honour represents and admiration for prior recipients. Subsequently, the tragic events of last week occurred. The decision has been made not to move forward with the award. Above all, I'm an American citizen with great reverence for our nation's values, freedom and democracy. I know I also represent my family and the New England Patriots team. One of the most rewarding things in my professional career took place in 2020, when through the great leadership within our team, conversations about social justice, equality and human rights moved to the forefront and became actions. Continuing those efforts while remaining true to the people, team and country I love outweigh the benefits of any individual award. If he had taken the award, how would that have gone down within the New England Patriots after the 6 Super Bowls? But what was more interesting for me is that everybody now is running away from Trump. The brand is going down in flames. And another real blow to his pride and his ego was that decision yesterday of the PGA of America to strip Bedminster, Trump's course, of the PGA Championship in 2022. So the PGA Championship is not going to Trump's course. Belichick has turned down the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Impeachment is coming. And now sport is joining the rest of a lot of American companies and American society in reacting to this outrage.
Yeah, I mean, a bit late to the day. I'm not going to give any of these people credit for suddenly waking up and smelling the coffee after the incident last week, which was particularly egregious, but it is of a piece with everything that Trump has done from the start. So I'm not giving golf a free pass for enabling him the whole way along, and I'm not giving Belichick a free pass either. It's going to be complicated. It'll be part of Belichick's legacy that he was a big booster of Trump from the get-go, and that Tom Brady was too. So they can't run away from that. I'd be interested to see exactly what the relationship between Brady and Trump is like into the future too. John, good stuff. Thanks a million.
All right, guys.
John Duggan with us this morning at 8:47. A reminder, of course, that we have loads of stuff coming for you on the show this morning. We have Deal or No Deal with Nathan, and we're also going to talk about the Tiger Woods documentary. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Our comments on the depth chart: Kilcoyne, Kelleher, Furlong. A lot of people, Eoin, suggesting that we should move Andrew Porter over to Loosehead and play him with Tadhg Furlong when Tadhg Furlong is fit, so that you get the dynamism of both of them into the team. If you're his agent and you're looking at the way that those salaries are paid every year, there's no way you're moving. Like Tighthead, always one of the top 5 paid players in the league. Loosehead, one of the bottom paid 3 or 4 players in the league. You're not moving. No thanks.
And you're almost the incumbent as well. There's a real debate between yourself and Tadhg Furlong at this point about who, if fully fit, would actually be the starting number 3 for Ireland. So not only is the debate about you need to move to actually ensure that you're going to start for Ireland actually not really much of a debate anymore, but also then you have the added sweetener of getting paid a little bit more if you stay on that side of the scrum. So it's a bit of a no-brainer from Andrew Porter's perspective to stay where he is, but I do think it's a bit of a no-brainer from Andy Farrell's perspective as well. And even listening to Keith this morning, it's not like Loosehead is a disaster position for Ireland at the moment. He's pretty happy with the depth there. And if Keith Wood is saying he's pretty happy with the depth there, then I think we should all be pretty confident in that as well, that we can be happy enough that Porter and Furlong can be the tight head, whoever it's going to be for the next 5-6 years.
All right, let's join our next guest, Denise O'Sullivan, who has 80 Ireland caps and 11 goals, and is, I'm delighted to say, with us now this morning. Denise, good morning to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You're back in Cork at the moment, are you?
I am. I've been back now about 3 weeks. Yeah. Because
before Christmas you were on loan with Brighton.
I went on loan, yeah. It was around September when I went to England, and I finished up on the 21st of December. That was my last game.
Okay, and you're on loan from North Carolina, is that right?
That's right, yeah, the Courage.
Okay, and what was the rationale behind the decision to go on loan to Brighton, and how come it's finished up?
Well, last year, obviously, during the pandemic, the league a full season didn't really go ahead. We played a bubble tournament in Utah. And after that, obviously, I had international duty coming up. And for me to be able to travel back and forth, I would have had to quarantine for 2 weeks when I got back to the States. So I would have missed a lot of games with the Courage. I would have missed a lot of training. So I spoke to the club and we came to the decision, and they fully respected that I should go to England and try and get game time there. And as well as that, I can play for my national team, which was really important at the time. And I decided I only wanted to go for a short-term loan because I wanted to get back to the Courage again for the season to start this year.
And when does that season start?
I'll go back probably in the next 2 weeks, and pre-season starts February 1st. They're planning to do the bubble tournament again, and then the season will start in May, full season.
Okay, right. So, and you're there then for the whole year. How much longer is your contract with the Courage?
I have this year left, and then there's an option year. So we'll see. We'll see after this year then, I guess, how it goes. You
obviously love it there. Like, there's a commitment to go back there. I guess, you know, the Women's Super League is booming at the moment, and I'm sure there would have been an opportunity there for you if you wanted, but you must really like the lifestyle in Carolina.
Yeah, I do. Obviously, England was a great experience, and I could have stayed there, but I think my commitment was to the Courage, and I have a contract to do for the next year, and I'm really committed to the team. I've improved a lot from being there, being surrounded by some of the best players in the world, and then Paul Riley is the coach, and you know, he's the one that really believed in me from the very start. When I was at Houston, and you know, I was probably at my lowest point in my career there, not getting game time and being so far away from family, and then the Courage came knocking, brought me there, trusted in me. They said they'd give me game time, and they did, and you know, I've really kicked on in my career since then. So I'm very happy to be there, and you know, it's a great environment. The demands of training is very, very high. It's very tough, and I think that's why we win championships, is because of the way we train. So I'm very excited to go back there. Before we get into what happened at Houston, can you talk to us a little bit about how you end up getting over to the States in the first place? I was with Glasgow City, obviously, for a good few years, I think 4 years before I signed for Houston. And we actually, with the national team, we went to play the USA in America. And after that game, my representative got a phone call from the Houston staff saying that they were interested in me. And to be honest, it's always been a dream of mine to go and play there in America. So it was kind of an easy decision for me. But I think at the time, a lot of things were happening at home, and I didn't really want to leave. But at the same time, it was a big opportunity. So I just went and gave it a go, and it's really worked out in the end. Eventually, because you mentioned there were some struggles at Houston. Yeah, absolutely. First year was fine when I went there in 2016. I was under Randy Waldrum, who was the coach at the time. He gave me a lot of game time. I settled in really quick. The girls were so nice. And then Randy left, a new coach came in, and you know, different coaches like different players, and I just wasn't one of those players that he liked. So I was on the bench, coming on for the last 2 minutes of games, going into Irish camp, not confident at all. I remember we had a game against Scotland. I was under Colin Bell at the time, and I just remember my game, I wasn't in form, wasn't confident on the ball, and it was after that game I decided that I'm going to go back and I'm going to speak to them and tell them I need to move because I wasn't happy there and I needed to get more game time.
When you have that conversation, Denise, are you thinking to yourself, this is America done for me? Did you think you were coming back over the Atlantic full time? Absolutely. Yeah, I actually thought I was going to Germany. I actually had a deal over there and I was almost done. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop in Chicago, and I got a phone call from Paul Riley, and he said, so you go out on a waiver list when you get waived, and that's a list that you can be picked up within 24 hours from any other team in the league. So to be honest, I thought, look, I wasn't getting game time. I'm not going to be picked up by any team. So this Germany deal was almost done. Paul Riley called me and said, we want you to come to North Carolina Courage. We'll give you game time. You'll get better. So I said, all right. And I was on a flight 2 days later, all my bags packed. So that's how it worked out. So you were on the waiver list. Obviously, you've got 24 hours to pick you up once you appear on the waiver. I presume that had Houston actually realised that was going to happen, that they might have looked for a bit of compensation, or how does that setup actually work? Yeah, when you go on the waiver, you're literally a free agent. So they didn't look for anything at all. They just let me go. At the time, thought I was going to Germany, but I just got picked up within the 24 hours, and I don't know, Houston were probably a bit surprised that I was going to another team, the NWSL, but I had to look after myself at the time, and that was the most important thing. How much does that experience motivate you? Proving that coach wrong in Houston, proving that club wrong, essentially putting you on the waiver and thinking that you actually wouldn't get another club in the United States.
Yeah, motivates me a lot, but I think, Houston gave me the opportunity to play in the league, and I'm grateful to that club, but going to the Courage has really pushed my career on, and just looking back now, not having confidence in myself at the time, thinking no one would pick me up in the league, and then one of the best clubs in the league actually picking me up, and I'm going on there, and I've almost started every game with them. Obviously I had to work really hard when I first got there. It took me a while to get into the team. I didn't expect the training to be so tough, and the environment to be so demanding at the time, and it took me a while, but I finally got there, and now it's absolutely amazing there. I'm just going to keep getting better as a player, I think.
When you talk about the environment being tough, is it the standard of training? Is it physicality? Is it emotionally tough? What was the most difficult thing about it?
I think, the standard of training is very, very high every single day. I think if you have a really, really tough training session, I think it's actually harder than a 90-minute game, if you ask me. So I think that's why we win championships, and because we train so hard, and the players around you set examples, because some of them are the best players in the world, and the only thing you can do when you go into an environment is follow their lead. So I think I look up to those players, and then you have Paul Riley, who is one of the best coaches in the world for women's football. He's a leader to the team and to all the girls, and we follow him, and he's created a fantastic environment, and he holds each player accountable every single day, and I think that's why we get better as players, and it's just an overall great environment.
Is there a difference in the standard, a difference maybe actually in the culture now that you've played in England as well as playing in the United States? Is the standard in training, as you mentioned there, very similar?
I think it's different, to be honest. I think it's more tactical training in England, where you walk through things a bit, and the coach tries to, make you learn a bit more. And I think within the Courage, you're just training full on. It's basically never stopped. Maybe a day before the game is where we would go, or 2 days before a game where we go and walk through set pieces and stuff like that. But throughout the week, training it's full on. You're playing games, you're just working really hard. And I think that's the biggest difference within it. It's just how much we train, and then the tactical side of the training in England. I would say that's the difference.
Right, that's interesting. So you've probably become a better player in that setup in the States then?
Well, for me, yeah. I want to train full on. There's times I don't want training to be stopped at all, because once you get into that rhythm, and you just want to keep training and work hard. But I think the environment there is absolutely top class, and I have gotten better since I got there, and I think there's more room for me to even get better. So I have to go back there, and with a strong mentality to try and get into the starting 11 again. I have been in the starting 11 the past few years, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go back there and walk straight into the team. There's going to be new players come in. There's going to be players that will leave. So it's going to be a different environment again, and it's going to be a new challenge. So I'm going to go back there and, work as hard as I can, and get into the starting 11, hopefully.
I know you said in the past, Denise, it was kind of hard for you to leave home to go to Scotland at the time. There was one move abroad that didn't happen initially because you just wanted to stay at home for another year. So what's it like to actually be back at home now, and to be spending a little bit more time in Cork?
Yeah, it's amazing. I think as I get older, I just want to be back here more and more. But yeah, once you're away, you do miss family, and especially being in America, it's tough with the time difference. So it's hard to catch them during the day at a right time as well. So to be back here is fantastic. And, I'm surrounded by, obviously I'm in a big family of 10. So everyone's really here every single day. I get to see all my nieces and nephews. So it's something I cherish every time I come back here, just to spend time with them. But I'm excited to leave and go back and start training again.
What's day-to-day life actually like in Carolina? What I had to look it up. It's It's in Kerry. Is that where the stadium is?
It is, yeah. It's in Kerry. It's really cool there. It's a chill city. We all live in an apartment complex, the whole team, 5 minutes from the stadium, basically. So that's really cool. We're all together. We only have to drive 5 minutes to get to the stadium. And, you know, it's a nice city. There's a lot of coffee shops there, which I absolutely love. We all love going out and, you know, doing that kind of thing together. So it's really nice. I've missed it the past few months, so I'm excited to get back there.
We've had Amy O'Connor on the show a few times, Denise, and she speaks with such pride about being from Knocknaheeny and how that patch of Cork is what made her essentially such a great sports person, the culture that existed there. I guess the amount of people around who were eager to play sport. Do you look back on your time being brought up in Knocknaheeny in a similar way, that without that place, you wouldn't have become the player that you were? Because I guess there's just so many minutes, so many people around to actually be playing with and to graft, I guess, as a young footballer.
Yeah, definitely. Knocknaheeny has made me the player I am today. It's helped me a lot growing up there. For years, I played with a boys team, and I think that's really, really helped me physically. I used to be out in the field in my park from the time I finished school at 2:00 till 8:00 at night. My mum would call me in for something to eat, and I would be non-stop out there playing with the boys, playing football all day. And you know, it just makes you stronger, you know, more eager to go. And then I joined New Farm Boys team, which was fantastic as well. And I just worked my way up from there. You know, just being surrounded by people here who are very motivated. Not much resources here. It's tough to, you know, to go out but look, I went from, I don't know, a little girl here playing in the fields, you know, using hoodies as goalposts growing up here to becoming a professional football player. So for any young girl here and boys that want to become professional football, you know, you just have to work hard. You have to graft every single day, and it's possible to come out of here and, you know, do good things.
What was that transition then like for you when I presume you got to a point and it's like you can't play on the boys team anymore? Were the resources there for you to be able to keep developing when you move over to a team that was just you and other girls?
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much around me at the time. There was no girls teams, to be honest, so I'd always have to travel out. And, you know, and then I joined Wilton United. I was under Pat Bowdren and Steve Lynch, absolutely fantastic coaches. And, you know, they done a lot for me, really a lot for me growing up playing with that girls team. And I think leaving the boys team was hard because I used to love playing with them. It was such a challenge, and it did make me better. But yeah, at 12 years old, you have to move on then and, you know, join a girls team. But I developed a lot at Wilton United. I was surrounded by really good players there as well. And then I moved on to the Cork team, which was, you know, I just kept going up the ranks. And for me, it was just about hard work and consistency. And I wanted to play for the national team. That was the goal. And I finally got there. So it's going well.
Look, we should probably talk about how the national team are dealing with the heartbreak of not qualifying and what that whole process has been like. Do you ever get over it, really? Nah,
definitely not. It was probably the lowest point of my career, and I think it was the lowest point of everyone's career on that team. It was absolutely devastating, honestly, but I think we look back and, you know, they're the types of heartbreaks that make you stronger and make us better as a team going forward. I think we have a lot to improve on. I think we're getting better, we're getting there, but we still have to improve on being more clinical in front of goal, cutting out, you know, little errors in games that we concede goals against. But yeah, it's been tough, and I don't think I'll ever get over that night, to be quite honest. We were so close yet again, so close, but we still didn't qualify. And you know, that's the main goal for myself and the girls, is to get to a major tournament. And we just have to really look forward now, and we have the World Cup qualifiers coming up next September. So I think we have to change our mindset and just do our best going forward, get better as a team, clean up on the things that we need to improve on, and, you know, just really push on and try and get to the World Cup.
Like the history of the men's team was getting very close, dodgy administration, bad refereeing, getting very close, a playoff, and it was like a long period of time before, you know, as a country, we haven't qualified for many tournaments, but some group had to be the first group to do it, and we know obviously the men did it, and they qualified in '87 for the '88 tournament. Your group has to be the first women's group to qualify for a tournament, and you must feel that that's the thing that keeps everybody going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, that's the main goal. We all want to qualify for a major tournament, and as you said, it's been such a long time since a group done it, and I think this is the group that are well capable of doing it. So looking on to the World Cup qualifiers, that's the goal. But against Ukraine, we were so close on getting there, and it was just such a shock and disappointment at the end when we didn't get there. But we want to do it for our fans, and I think that was the most. Every single person in Ireland was behind us that night, and that's what we cherish as players, and we want to give the fans something to look forward to as well. So it was very disappointing and heartbreaking for everyone that supported us up to that point and that night, but hopefully they'll keep supporting us and get behind us and get us to a World Cup.
I think they will. I think that bond has been made now and forged, and it doesn't go away. You know, once you get the Irish public on side, they're with you for life. So, well, listen, Denise, we wish you the best of luck. Safe travels back to the States, and thanks a million.
Thanks very much. Thank you. It's
Denise O'Sullivan there with 80 Ireland caps and 11 goals, heading back to the US very soon to take part in the league there. It's 6 minutes past 9 this morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're back talking the new Tiger Woods doc and Deal or No Deal with Nathan next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
Ferguson has a knack for seeing maverick and, kind of creative genius and sort of letting it flow.
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists. The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
When was your peak?
Yeah, I probably would say around 2009, 2010. And I suppose what is your peak? I suppose it's when you feel confident in yourself, and it's usually down to preparation you put in. And there was a time when I really worked hard on my own skills. Pat Gilroy put me under pressure. I was working hard. I was getting out. I was practicing my kicking. I was striking the ball beautifully, and I felt as if every time I got the ball, I was gonna make something happen. I had some good years other than that in 2015 and a good year 2013. I had a nice end to the year, getting a couple of goals in our final, but I never got that inner confidence I had maybe that I had in 2010. In 2010, I said it before, I felt if I had a free or a shot inside the 45, that box of the 45, I felt as if I was going to score left or right. And it was as cocky, as arrogant, whatever it was, but that was just my feeling and my gut, and I always tried to get back to that. And it was a product of practice. I used to go out with my 10 footballs up to Westonstown or down to Plunkett's or anywhere around locally, just a set of posts, and just bang the ball over the bar as many times as I could whenever I got a chance.
Was it that simple? Because there's going to be a lot of people now who are obviously stuck in lockdown and they can't train with their clubs at the minute and they might have a couple of footballs. Is there an element of smart practice with that as well, Bernard? Because you could go out and kick 100 footballs and not get anything from it.
I doubt it. I doubt you get nothing from it, kicking 100 footballs, no matter what you were doing with it. But I think that opportunity, and I know you have to stay within your 2K, but times like this is when people can hone their skills. I'd love to be in the middle of my career at the moment, looking forward to, let's say, a championship in July, but been a dub, or an Ireland final in June, July, whenever the championship really heats up, and getting out and having a bit of free time in the week to just get after the skills that are important to you. For me, it was just getting out and practicing 50 kicks a night and getting that striking well, not even from too far out, making sure my percentages were up at 90, 95% left and right. I used to just go around the arc of the D, literally the D. I put 10 balls or 15 balls around the D and just go with my left foot. When I got to halfway, I turned to my right foot and I go back to the end and just do that 3 or 4 times all day long. If you can just get that to 100, every time you kick the ball, it's going over, then you just bring it out then 5 yards and out 5 yards. And I'd love to be in that place now where I could do that 4 or 5 times a week. If I was a inter-county player now, or I am still a club player, so I don't get the free time to go out. with 2 babies at home. But yeah, like that's what made me, gave me the confidence, I suppose, because that's what it's about. It's having that inner confidence. And yes, your performance won't always be great. I didn't always play well. I didn't always score the score, but I felt as if I was there and I had the preparation done. And other years when things went well, and I sometimes look back and say I just didn't do enough. I genuinely would say, just I won the Ulster that year, but I didn't feel like I actually did enough. I could have been a lot better. I also tried to get back to that, and why I didn't feel I was as good is because I didn't feel like I put in as much effort off the training park, because we all train as teams and in groups of 15 and 20, but the magic for a high performer is the time you spend away from the group and what you're doing then. That for me is the key.
That's really interesting. And are you able to describe, you spoke about it being not a cockiness or a confidence, but you just felt like you were going to score?
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, the world's best-selling plug-in hybrid, is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See MitsubishiMotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
11 minutes past 9 this morning. You'll have heard Bernard Brogan in the ad break there, and a special bonus episode of the Bernard Brogan podcast that we're launching today at 12 o'clock on OTB Sports Radio and on the OTB GAA podcast stream. We'll bring you behind the scenes of season 1 and recap on some of the stories and themes from the series. It's all brought to you thanks to Super Value, proud sponsors of the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. Right, Nathan Murphy, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
So the Tiger documentary, Eoin has got an advanced screener because he's on one of those special secret mailing lists. He's a member of the Stonecutters. And so he's seen the first episode of the new HBO documentary. You, of course, have read the book, so perhaps a lot of the details of what's in the doc aren't going to be too much of a surprise. Eoin, what is the most amazing stuff that has got you going, wow, in the first episode?
I'm not sure if all this stuff is in the book, Nathan, but certainly how I would say Tiger's parents would have viewed his first girlfriend. And we'll play a clip in a moment about how Tiger dumps his first girlfriend, which is clearly a directive from his parents because it's all about creating a robot, as she puts it in the documentary. And there can be no distractions. There can be no, I guess, walking down the garden path to show him the things in life that don't involve golf. I found that really interesting, and I guess how she has this lived experience of being something that the very early part of the Tiger machine chewed up and spat out. I'm not sure if that stuff was in the book itself, Nathan, or was that new to you?
No, that's all there. So the book, the biography of Tiger by Jeff Benedict and Arma Katayan, it is one of the best sports books of the last few years. And the documentary, having watched it, somehow getting hold of a copy last night, it is a film version of the book and goes along a similar pattern. I would say there's probably more gossip in the book, in the film, than there was in the book. The book is split between really, really juicy gossip, but also a sort of constant reminder of Tiger's greatness and what went into making him such a great golfer. So there's not a huge amount of startling revelations, but it's still pretty fascinating to see and hear from some of the characters in Tiger's life. You have everybody from Dina, his first girlfriend, his kindergarten teacher is there, and you've got the big stars like Nick Faldo and Steve Williams. And I think the one thing you can take as read is that Tiger will never speak to any of these people again.
That's true. I do think
you're
as well
outside that circle of trust, you are gone.
The thing that the documentary can do that the book probably can't is give more of a visual representation of what Tiger was in his childhood, and his first girlfriend does have incredible photographs and video content, which obviously you're not going to get from the book, which kind of portrays Tiger as this really goofy kid who was really fun and was not the serious sadness in his eyes sort of a teenager that he would become to go on and conquer the world. There are a couple of things we want to play here from the documentary. One of the things that always fascinates everyone, I think, around Tiger is his relationship with race, his view of it. And I guess we've heard Tiger talk about this a bit in the past, especially when it comes to some of the 90s archive. But the subject of Tiger and that interview he did with Oprah, referring to himself as Tablinasian, is covered in the documentary. But what is really interesting is when they get Jim Riswold of Nike, and he tells us about the first meeting, or one of the first meetings he has with Tiger and his father. And they have this conversation about whether or not they want to play the race card. Have a listen to this.
Golf was very lily white, and there was some discussion. I brought it up. I said, do we want to play the race card? Nike's not stupid financially. Using Tiger to reach a wider range of golfer and expand the golf universe is a no-brainer. They said, yeah, let's do this.
It's basically everything that you've heard about Tiger and everything that Tiger has said about, trying to not play the race card in public ways is completely contradicted by what Jim Riswold says there. And this was certainly the strategy that they took up with Nike. And obviously, he doesn't say exactly who said that in the meeting. Was it Earl or was it Tiger? You could probably guess it might have been his father. And their amount of anecdotes about this guy is incredible, especially the hard ass that he was on the course. We get a few stories about some of the stuff he did to Tiger to basically wind him up. Joe Groman is one of the main voices in part one. He's going to be a big voice in part two as well, he suspects. He's a friend of Earl's who would have spent a lot of time on the same golf courses as him. And it's his voice here first telling us about some of the stuff that Earl would have done to wind Tiger up.
Earl invited me to play with him and Tiger. Mind you, I still don't know who Tiger is. I just think he's Earl's kid, so I'm kind of checking him out while we play. Whenever Tiger would go to hit, Earl would start jiggling his change and talking to me like I'm talking right now, loud, just being completely rude.
That didn't work.
Finally, like on the 6th hole, I shush Earl. I shush him. And Earl's like, Joe, don't you know what I'm doing? He goes, I'm preparing Tiger to play through distraction when he gets to the tour.
Earl did everything he could to toughen his boy up. One of the things that really made Tiger incredibly strong was this ability that he had, taught to him by his father's friend, who was a naval psychological ops operative, basically, a psychologist, to hypnotize himself. People say, oh, Tiger's in the zone. But he literally was in some sort of a trance, which is an amazing thing that you would do for a kid that was 13 or 14.
Is this parenting inspiration for you, Nathan?
Well, I think the theme of the entire documentary is Earl Wood's influence on Tiger on and off the course, and how much credit you can give Earl Woods, but also how responsible he is for the character that Tiger ultimately became. And the documentary starts with this famous speech of Earl Woods when Tiger is back in college, saying that this young man is going to transcend the game. He's going to bring the world a humanitarianism never before seen. The world will be a better place by virtue of his existence. And that is the sort of pressure that Earl was putting on Tiger, not just to be the greatest golfer that ever lived, but to be one of the greatest humans that ever lived. Now, he's hit half of that. He did transcend the game. He is the greatest golfer who ever lived. He's in the running for the greatest sports person who's ever lived.
One out of two ain't bad, yeah.
But as a humanitarian, he has come up short. And even going back to Nike, like, you sort of see that develop into Tiger's fan base. And what it did was allow white America to pat itself on the back. It allowed white America to say, how can we be racist when we like to watch this black golfer win all these golf tournaments? And it is to the shame of golf more than Tiger that we're a quarter of a century on. There's still only one other black golfer on the PGA Tour. So they haven't capitalized on his success within that community at all. And then there's the other side. There's the everyday life side, which they touched on a little bit. Part of the callousness, I think, that was there from his father went through to Tiger, and we saw that with his breakup from his first girlfriend, who they were incredibly close. And the footage is one of the highlights of seeing a very different Tiger Woods as a teenager in a very relaxed setting, having the crack at a party, just not the sort of Tiger Woods you would have ever seen. But they split up with a letter that, while it might be in Tiger's writing, is written by his parents. And that is the end of it. They, it seems, are destined maybe for marriage, even though they're still quite young. And like that, it is all over. And they don't touch on it hugely in the documentary, but it's there throughout the book. And I think it was Jimmy Stewart, who's one of the NBC columnists, But the Tiger demanded respect, but he never ever returned it, and he went through life thinking that everybody owed him. And like Tiger was notoriously tight to the extent that at one stage PGA Tour officials would be going around tipping on his behalf. So there was something about him that he never felt the need ever to say thank you. And that's the same with Earl. So we hear from his coach there. Earl was a genius at knowing the power of Tiger. So Earl would present Tiger along the way as he needed better quality of coaching. And he would go and he would meet the coach that he wanted to coach him. And he would show him Tiger. And straight away, the dollar signs would flash in front of the coach, thinking this guy, you could tell at such a young age, had all this potential. But the coach would never be paid. The coach was sort of strung along on the pretense that, well, this guy is going to be the greatest golfer and you're going to be his coach. And then when they were done with him, they dumped him and your man never got paid. So there's that level of, is it pettiness, of just badness and that was there. But did it all work out? And the other thing, going back to what Earl had to say when Tiger was a young man, about 2 minutes later, one of their friends says, Earl was a first-class bullshitter. Like, he sort of guided his way through this by chancing his arm a lot, by building Tiger up. But it put Tiger in a position that he's never lived up to. And even today, when you're talking about Bill Belichick handing back his Medal of Honor, like, Tiger Woods received one from Donald Trump, a smiling Tiger Woods beside Donald Trump, 18 months ago at this stage.
Yeah, well, look, he'll always have that. I mean, he also has to take responsibility for his own decisions here. I can't give the man a free pass. He's a grown man now, and he's still making decisions. He's still that same person. So while the apple might not fall far from the tree, and it's, he has been raised in this specific way, at some point along the way, he gets the opportunity to say, my value system is wrong, and I need to fix that. I could learn to tip, for example. You know?
But he didn't. And the way and what we would see...
But that's on him, is my point.
It is, but clearly it is. And everyone has to take responsibility for their own actions. But he was huge. His father was by far and away the most influential figure in his life. And part one finishes with this sort of teasing shot of Rachel Uschitel taking a seat in front of the camera. And Rachel Uschitel is the first woman that Eoin discovered Tiger was having an affair with. And she's the woman that led to Tiger crashing into the fire hydrant that night and this pretty lurid sporting scandal. But all that followed with that Tiger story, Tiger had seen his father do, obviously away from the glare, but the way Earl Woods treated people was the way he treated women. He just picked them up, threw them away, and Tiger was in situations with his father that no child should be around. And it's hard to see how he wasn't damaged by that. Now, that is not in any way to excuse what he did, but his father was this influence that I think while he had a hugely damaging effect, Tiger wouldn't have been the golfer he was without him as well.
It's a curious parallel, if nothing else, really, when you hear these stories of how Earl Woods behaved. You mentioned that letter, Nathan. We have that audio here. And just to give a quick bit of context to it, this is Dina Parr, Tiger's first girlfriend, reading out this letter. And basically, Tiger comes home from college early one weekend and spends the night with her, doesn't tell his parents. When he eventually gets home the day after, his parents go absolutely crazy and tear into him. And then not long afterwards, Dina receives this letter, which she reads out. Have a listen.
Dina, the reason for writing this letter is to inform you my parents and myself never want to talk or hear from you again. Reflecting back over this relationship, I feel used and manipulated by you and your family. I hope the rest of your life runs well for you. I know this is sudden and a surprise, but it is, in my opinion, much warranted. Sincerely, Tiger. Yeah, it was awful. I mean, we've been in this 3-year relationship. And, I thought about, should I drive over there? I just wanted to confront him. I just wanted him to look me in the face and tell me this. If it's the truth, then we're good. Then our relationship is a whole lie. That's fine, but I want to hear it from you. It's just, I replay that day in my head over and over again. What happened? What really triggered all this? But, it has to be that it was just the plan.
Ugh. Well, that's pretty horrific behavior. What is it with golfers and breaking up with people by text?
Yeah, in the build-up to the letter, so we see the video of them having a very good time together, but also Dina is from a very regular background and talks to Tiger a lot about having to have some sort of normality in his life, that as he goes through golf, he's going to have to retain the other side, and also how he's going to have some balance in his life. And you can just imagine his parents listening to that. And it is both his parents. While Earl was front and center, his mother in the background was pushing Tiger just as hard. You'd hear her like, Tiger, you know, when you get the opportunity, you kill them. She described Phil Mickelson as Hefty Phil. Rather than lefty, she described him as hefty. So this was there at every possible turn for Tiger. This was what he was being met with.
Yeah, okay. So look, he didn't have much chance, but at the same time, okay. So maybe he gets a bit of a free pass for some of the stuff, but not all of it. Last clip.
Yeah, actually, do you know what? Let's play the last clip. This is, as Nathan mentioned, about the behaviour of his father. So Tiger's away with his dad. Earl is cheating, and this is Dina Power again, who tells this story. Have a listen.
When Tiger and I were still together, he would travel in the summer for tournaments with his dad. And he called me one time, and I will never forget. He was sobbing on the phone, uncontrollably. I couldn't even understand what he was saying. He was so upset. He, finally caught his breath and, said, "My dad's out again. He met this girl, and they're going out." The sound of Tiger's voice was so upsetting. I wanted to crawl through the phone and just take care of him. I've never heard somebody in my life so upset. And his dad, I don't think, really cared that he knew it. I think that also bothered him. Like, why would you not try to hide this from me? Why would you just, let me see this? Tiger's mom was a loyal, good mother, and he absolutely loved her. So there was an anger there with his dad. But he could never show it. He could never express it. He had to keep that in. And it changed the relationship with him and his dad. Did he still idolize him and love him? Absolutely. But it changed. It changed.
Right. So part one of the documentary has aired. When is part two? Part two is in the States this week, is it, or next week?
This week again, I think, yeah.
Right.
So hopefully it becomes to an Irish screen near you very, very shortly.
Okay. It will be interesting to see how it ends, because the book came out a couple of years ago before Tiger won the Masters. So while it's being teed up as the real salacious stuff from the night of the fire hydrant and talking to a lot of those that he was having affairs with, it obviously also, well, in some ways it's probably reflective of everything that went on, where we have this genius on the golf course, but it's built up to modern day, where he has matured into this, you'd have to say, politically extremely disappointing 45-year-old.
Right. So that's that. Time for Deal or No Deals.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Nathan, before we get into any deal talk, will Manchester United be top of the league by the end of today? Can they beat Klopp's injury hit Liverpool on Sunday evening?
By the end of today, I think they will. And yeah, they can beat Liverpool at the weekend. Funny, I was watching Liverpool-Manchester United from 2009 over the weekend. Stumbled upon it. They were showing the full game. What a game. Gerrard and Torres peaking their powers. Rooney and Ronaldo for Manchester United. And Liverpool obviously won that battle and won it well. But Manchester United always went on to win the war. And that may be what we see here, that maybe United do scrape a victory, but I still can't see them finishing above Liverpool in the Premier League table. They're going to Anfield at a good time, considering all the problems that Liverpool have. And these games, aside from the 2-0 win for Liverpool last season, generally have been very, very tight. It'll be interesting tactically how Solskjaer sets up to counter Liverpool. But there's no reason why, with the talent United have, they can't beat them. But even if they do win, I would still expect Liverpool to finish ahead of Manchester United.
Was that Nemanja Vidic getting destroyed by Torres that game?
By Fernando Torres, yeah, the 4-1.
All right, wow. Roy Keane's potential return to football management has been discussed on the show. A one-line answer. Who are the highest ranked club who might realistically take a punt on Roy?
Queen's Park Rangers, Sheffield Wednesday, bottom third of the championship right now.
That's what you think, yeah?
Yeah, and listen, it's 10 years since he's managed a team, so I would hate to see him leave our TV screens, but I think he deserves another chance. I think he has done enough as a player, as a manager, to get another opportunity.
The TV gig is a good gig. It's a great gig. It's an enjoyable gig. Stick with it.
Arguably a far more influence there than you do sitting in the dugout at Hillsborough.
Way more. Right, former Man City winger Trevor Sinclair believes that Leo Messi's potential move to Manchester City could cause complications for Kevin De Bruyne's contract negotiations. Those talks are reported to have stalled. His current deal runs to only 2023, which is transfer saga next season, obviously, at the end of this one, if they don't do a deal. If Messi comes to the club, who deserves to be Manchester City's highest paid player?
If Messi does come, it's Lionel Messi. Lionel Messi deserves to be the best paid player wherever he goes. And Kevin De Bruyne, while you might be the footballer of the year, you're having the greatest player of all time coming to join you, and all that will bring commercially. So while I'm sure it will cause issues and will change the structure at Manchester City, and maybe they can work around it, because with financial fair play, they're going to have to structure this deal in a way that they're not paying Lionel Messi 500 grand a week and Kevin De Bruyne trying to respond. But De Bruyne is in a position where he is arguably the best player in the Premier League. He's certainly up there in the top 2 or 3. That on his own at a club like Manchester City, he can expect to be paid 250, 300 grand a week. But if Messi is coming in on a deal where he's getting up on 500 grand a week, you just got to suck it up. But it is, I'm sure, it's not just Kevin De Bruyne. When Phil Foden is signed a new contract, suddenly everything is doubling. Yeah,
Phil Foden's going to get very well paid as well. Do you believe De Bruyne will stay at City long term?
Yes. Yeah, I think if Messi is coming, you don't want to leave.
Napoli have long-term ambitions to sign Arsenal and Scotland defender Kieran Tierney. How impressed have you been by the 23-year-old's recent form, and where does he rank among the league's best left-backs?
There's a lot of good left-backs in the Premier League at the moment. I'd probably have him obviously behind Andy Robertson, who is the best left-back in the Premier League by a distance still. Sergio Aguilón's been very good at Tottenham since he arrived in. Tierney's in a different position in that he's playing in a pretty poor Arsenal team, but like Robertson, he's the one who's bringing a huge amount of character to that side. So it's not just what he's doing as a left back, and technique-wise, he's doing everything right. He's getting into those advanced positions. The quality of his crossing seems to be improving. He's a very, very solid defender, but it's in a team lacking leaders that he seems to actually be the one who's bringing that bit of doggedness, who's bringing that bit of character. So he's getting better. There's no reason in the next season or two why he isn't in the mix to be the best left back in the Premier League. But I think Robertson is still, in terms of the quality of his crossing as much as anything else, is still a step ahead of everyone else.
You love him, Eoin.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. I think you can't but love this guy if you support Arsenal. He's been Arsenal's best player, maybe second best player out after Bukayo Saka this season. I think he is the second best left back in the Premier League at the moment. A lot of hardcore Arsenal fans would say he's better than Andy Robertson at this point, which is definitely an overstatement. Robertson is definitely the best left back in the league. If this is real, I'm not sure where you're getting your sources from. This would be a disaster for Arsenal if Napoli did come in and swoop for him, especially if it's a short-term thing. I can't imagine there's any truth to this in the short term, because Arsenal have already let Sead Kolasinac go this window, and I'm sure that if Kieran Tierney was on the way out, they would have kept him for the rest of the season, basically. So I'm not sure this is a short-term thing.
We've seen many signs of Arsenal's fall from grace on the pitch over the last few years, but off the pitch, if Kieran Tierney was to leave mid-season or even next summer, Kieran Tierney is a type of player you got to build this side around over the next couple of years. Do Arsenal fans think he's better than Andy Robertson? Because I often think they have a weighty support of the Celtic supporters behind them who feel that Kieran Tierney is better than Andy Robertson simply by the fact that, well, Kieran Tierney played for Celtic, which gives them an extra level of competence that, well, poor Andy Robertson can never have.
Well, the thing is, Arsenal fans exist in a post-ironic world where everything we say is very ironic, where Bernd Leno is Oliver Kahn and David Luiz is Virgil van Dijk. So it's hard to sometimes actually take the real comparisons and actually think, is this a legitimate comparison that people are making? But I do believe there's a certain section of the fan base that, like you, expecting to go close to Robertson over these next few years and perhaps become better than him. Playing for a better team would help, definitely, if he was in Robertson's position and had Sadio Mane as the person he's tic-tacking with on the left-hand side. Would he be a better player? Would he look a better player? There's no doubt he would. So I think you've got to give him a bit of credit for shining in a team that has been terrible for a lot of this season. But I think actually since Saka has moved on to the right-hand side, he's got a bit more freedom in front of him and has looked a hell of a lot better. But yeah, you're right. It would be terrible, terrible, terrible news if this deal or no deal moment were to actually come true.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question on Bernd Leno? Because listen, we all get a little bit of abuse online from time to time. But a couple of weeks ago, I was doing commentary on Aston Villa against Chelsea, and I made a comment about Emi Martinez and how brilliant he was. And surely there are people at the Emirates who are wondering how they let this guy go. And I have never got so much. I have never got so much abuse. The amount of DMs I got from angry Arsenal fans to learn something about footy, mate, before I go on the TV discussing Emi Martinez, that Bernd Leno is an outstanding goalkeeper and there's no way in hell we would swap. So maybe do a bit of research.
I remember listening to that commentary, Nathan, and I almost punched my television with the commentator that was on the mic that night. I actually don't have any issue with that statement. What I have an issue with is the revisionism that's going on about Emi Martinez, that people are like, oh, well, people knew that he was going to become the next big thing, which they didn't really know at Arsenal. This was kind of a random occurrence last season that he became as good as he was. And when he became as good as he was, there was always going to be clubs interested in him to the point where he wasn't going to be happy to be backup goalkeeper. And Mikel Arteta had to make a choice between Bernd Leno or Emi Martinez. Leno, who's been brilliant for Arsenal, even though Martinez had been as well, got his pick. And I think fair enough. The decision was the correct one. I do remember that commentary moment, though, Nathan, and I'm sorry you got so many DMs. I apologize.
How many burner accounts do you have?
A lot. If I ever get praise on Twitter, it's me who's praised myself.
Creative Bournemouth midfielder David Brooks is an Aston Villa target. They also have their eye on making the deal for Ross Barkley permanent. The latest reports are the Barkley deal won't happen. What impact would Brooks make at Villa Park, and what do you know about him, Nathan?
I know 2 seasons ago he was exceptional for Bournemouth. They had that attacking team of Brooks, of Fraser and Wilson, and they were pretty devastating. Brooks picked up a bad injury, never really played at all last season. When he came back then, when football restarted, he looked miles off the pace. But he's obviously back playing week in, week out. The worry when you hear of them signing somebody like David Brooks is he a Jack Grealish replacement? I know he generally plays more on the right, but he can sort of play anywhere. That's why he would be such an attractive signing for Villa, is that he can play on the right of a front three, he can play a little bit deeper in midfield. And Bournemouth have been selling so far. They've got rid of Fraser and Wilson already. It is whether they'd be willing to sell him in January when they're putting together a pretty decent push for promotion back to the Premier League. But at his best, he was nominated for Young Footballer of the Year when he was at his best. He's still only 23. So for Villa,
good signing.
If they could get him for 15-20 million, a very good signing.
All right, deal or no deal, star Paul Pogba is expected to leave United in the summer. Juve have been touted as the most likely destination, but the Daily Star reports that Mauricio Pochettino wants to bring the French World Cup winner to Paris to build his team around the 27-year-old. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is Paul Pogba to win a Champions League in the next 5 years?
To win a Champions League, I thought you were going to ask to leave Manchester United. To win a Champions League, I would say 7 or an 8. He's always going to be at one of the best clubs in Europe. Like, even if he leaves Manchester United, it's going to be to a Paris Saint-Germain or to another side that are going to be getting to Champions League quarterfinals, semi-finals. So there's no reason why Paul Pogba can't be a Champions League winner and ram it all down our throats, everything that has been said about him over the last few years. So, yeah, I don't think Paul Pogba is just going to fade into oblivion over the coming years.
All right, very quickly, literally a minute left in this. Jesse Lingard is being linked with a move to Inter. A great deal for Manchester United if they can get him to take any of his massive salary off their hands, but it will only happen if Christian Eriksen can be offloaded because he's been a complete flop. Where does Christian Eriksen, who's 28, go from here?
Well, Arsenal was the speculation, wasn't it? It hasn't worked out for him at all. And he is one of the only ones of the Premier League players who've ended up in Italy. And it's surprising because everything suggests that Christian Eriksen would slot in comfortably, but he's not getting any game time. And is a return to the Premier League. He was one of the best, most talented players in the Premier League before he left.
For a while, so then there was a year where he wasn't.
And maybe his head was turned, and maybe it's just gone. Like, if it's a year that's turned into 2 years, how easy is it to get it back? I'd imagine there's still no shortage of clubs in the Premier League who would take Christian Eriksen back. And for United, it is finding some slot for Jesse Lingard that will either take him permanently or take a good chunk of that salary. They did extend his contract, and I'm not sure where Lingard fits into that Conte side at the moment, but it does feel as though momentum is building around Jesse Lingard and he's going to go somewhere.
All right, that is today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it?
On tomorrow's show, we'll bring you Andy Mitten reacting to Manchester United against Burnley. We'll also catch up with Irish pentathlete Natalia Coyle, a couple of months out from what we hope will be the Olympics in 2021. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. My thanks to you all. My thanks to Nathan as well for being part of Deal or No Deal today. But that is just now we're going to bring you Lawrence Donegan chatting to Joe Malloy about golf's relationship with Donald Trump.
It is the second time in 6 years a course has been removed off a planned schedule. The 2015 Grand Slam of Golf was due to be held at Trump National in LA, but that was cancelled after Trump's remarks about Mexican immigrants. So there is some past history. I know a US Open in 2017 went ahead at Bedminster. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the golfing world and Trump, because that is an interesting relationship, just for a moment on Wednesday evening, because I think, you know, to an extent, we all sit down and are gripped by an evening on CNN, and of course, Trump's presidency has had very real effects, you know, for all of us, Paris Accord and various other issues. But to be living in the States, to be raising a child in the States, and almost feeling like the country is coming apart at the seams, I mean, that is that's a lived experience as opposed to us almost looking on in bemusement and horror. You're kind of experiencing the realities of that. So, you know, thoughts Wednesday and the last couple of days, Lawrence?
Well, I mean, how do you sum it up? To a certain extent, I live in a kind of liberal enclave in Northern California, so you're quite isolated from it. However, you watch my kid and his contemporaries, they are utterly gripped by this. It's an event. Well, certainly nothing I've ever experienced in my life, but I can't imagine what it must be like to be a kid and watching this, you know, a kid who's aware of events in the world, you know, not young kids. So it's, I mean, it's seismic. Goodness knows what it must have been like in DC last week. This is, I mean, my kid's 15 years old. All he wants to do is listen to political podcasts right now, to catch up and to try and understand what's happened. People will be talking about this, and the great American historian Michael Beschloss was on TV this morning, and he was saying, you know, this will be talked about and written about in 200, 300 years' time. It's, as I say, it's hard for me, for where I am, to fully grasp it, but you can get a sense of it, and it only appears to be growing. And goodness knows what's going to happen when he leaves, because there's a 30 to 35% swathe of the population believe in this guy. It really is. I'm not saying anything original here, but it really is a kind of cult, and it's kind of scary to think about where it's heading.
Bedminster, Trump's course, was awarded the PGA Championship in 2014, which feels like a more instant time right now. 2022 will be right in the midst of the midterms. You suspect, as you've just outlined, this problem is not going away, and so official golf, and we'll get on to unofficial golf actually in a moment, but it would seem, Lawrence, that official golf is doing its damnedest right now to move away from Trump.
Yeah, I think this is a break, and I don't think it's ever coming back. That relationship is ever coming back. They kind of, for a long time, they held him at arm's length. The thing about Trump, he bought Bedminster, which is a club, a distressed golf club. This is his business model. He'd jump into a distressed golf club, buy it, put a bit of money into, and try and gloss it up. He really got involved because he couldn't get into any of the established East Coast golf clubs. So there was he eventually got into Winged Foot, but I mean, a lot of the, Shinnecock's and all these golf would never have anything to do with him. So to a certain extent, golf has kept him at arm's length. But official golf, you're right. The one you left off the list, Joe, Doral. The PGA Tour had an event at Doral for 50 years or so, and they took it away in 2016. Again, after the remarks on Mexican immigrants. And I noticed this week that the event was taken to Mexico, and it's leaving Mexico this year, and it's going back to Florida, and it's not going back to Trump's course. So, yeah, I mean, this really is the break, and a sense that there's absolutely no way of it ever being restored. The statement from the R&A was pretty declarative, although it was quite cute. It didn't actually mention the name. But it's made it clear that they are not going back to Turnberry as long as Trump is the owner there.
Yes. He bought Doral in 2012, and as you said, it was a mainstay on the tour for a long time. The RNA statement, Martin Slumbers here, we will not return. This is to Turnberry, iconic venue, you know, Watson Nicholas in 77 and Tom Watson's Stuart Sink more recently, will not return until we are convinced that the focus will be on the championship, the players and the course itself, and we do not believe that is achievable in the current circumstances, which it surely isn't. Now, it should be said, like Slumbers said before, he believed Trump had been good for golf in terms of renovation in the past, and in February of last year he said that he'd be more than open to playing a round of golf with Trump, and he said, Turnberry, I am sure it will stage an Open in the not too distant future. So, I mean, golf is reacting now. It would be wrong to say it's been totally ahead of the game either.
Oh, definitely not. And there was a really great column in the Washington Post last week about this. You know, what happens when Tiger played with Trump and we all piled on, he's saying, well, I have to respect the office. Well, Trump won't be in the office after January the 20th. And it'll be very, very interesting to see who still hangs out with this guy and who doesn't. I suspect that there will be a queue of golfers running to play with the disgraced American president, Donald Trump. So, yeah, I mean, golf, but by no means, again, very, I mean, who cares? But, I mean, I had a go at Rory but a while back when he played with Trump, and the abuse I got for bringing that up. I mean, Rory subsequently said that he wished he hadn't done it. But yeah, golf has not been not been in the vanguard of the anti-Trump movement. Let's put it like that.
And so, segueing slightly into unofficial golf, that's the point you've raised now. Like, to what extent is Trump toxic in the eyes of golfers? And we are talking about Republican country here. You're shaking your head. You're shaking your head as if to say not at all. Because I was going to put it to you. For instance, Bryson DeChambeau, who celebrated his US Open, I think it might have been at Bedminster with some of the Trump family.
Went back to Bedminster.
So we noticed that the Trump golf logo was not on his bag in Hawaii, and people said, well, I wonder, has Bryson seen the light? Your laughter says, don't be so silly.
Well, no. Again, like the PGA of America, I'm sure Bryson's he wouldn't have been getting paid much for the Trump golf logo in his golf bag, because Trump is nothing if not cheap. He probably kind of leaned on him. I'll give you a couple of free nights at Bedminster and you can stick that. That's valuable real estate if you're a golfer of Bryson's standing. So what was your question again, Joe?
To what extent will he be toxic, do you think, across the PGA Tour?
Not in the slightest. Not in this. I mean, again, somebody asked me this morning, what percentage of PGA Tour pros would be supportive of Trump politically? Again, this is a number we will never know, but you'd have to suspect is above 80%. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head one single publicly liberal golfer on the PGA Tour, not one. I can't think of any, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. Again, Trump played so much golf, so you really have to pay attention. And it's not often said, but he plays a lot with Pat Perez. I mean, who knew? So these names are never released, but occasionally something will slip out, and there's always PGA Tour golfers involved. Yeah. He is them, and they are him. I mean, the PGA Tour golfers who express political views on social media are 100%. They're usually just terrible right-wing opinions. I tell you, so it's now forgotten, but back in the day, Ricky Fowler, before his minders got to him, used to post the most vile right-wing stuff on his Twitter feed, and obviously that was bad for the brand. And that was all expunged, and he's now it's all cookies and cream, Ricky Fowler. But no, it's as I say, post January the 20th, I suspect there will be a queue of golfers lining up to play with Donald Trump. Yeah. I mean, look at last week with Sorenstam and Gary Player. The day after the insurgency in Washington, D.C., they're lining up to get their little medals from Donald Trump. I mean, it's just astonishing.
That was astonishing. I mean, of all days to be there at the White House.
Of all days.
That was, because I am, by the way, when I have this conversation, I am differentiating between being a Republican, which, perfectly fine, it's a political conviction, and Trump, who is just so clearly a different beast entirely. Like Nicholas jumps to mind if you're talking like the greatest champion, as is often said in the history of the game. Whatever about player, we can debate that, but the greatest champion in the history of the game. I mean, like he was just like classic apologist. You know, Trump kind of rough around the edges and says some mad things, but you know, we've got to protect America from socialism. In his big post before Trump was elected, and said Trump had worked for the average person. I was kind of thinking, like, surely. Yeah, but he's got to see some sense here. But then even I did a bit more digging. He did an interview with the Palm Beach Post after that Instagram post he put up, and he's saying things like, you know, on the COVID deaths, the hospital gets more money with COVID than they do any other death. I'm sure there's been a lot of that. I don't think the deaths are the correct number, and I hate to say that rather. So he's, you know, even buying into conspiracy theories about the number of COVID deaths, and it's bloody Jack Nicklaus here. Like he's like he is the golden boy. Well, the thing about Nicholas is that, I mean, he would vote for the proverbial chimpanzee if had a Republican rosette on its chest. He was out campaigning back in the day for George W. Bush right after the Iraq War. So I don't think we would expect any less or any more from Jack Nicklaus. You see, I sort of do when it comes to Trump. I just think this guy is so extreme to everything which has gone before. That's why I still reserve the right to be actually kind of, not maybe shocked, but like disappointed. Like, oh, come on, you as well, really? You're seeing the last 4 years and you think that's great? But you got to remember, Joe, this is a guy who got 74 million votes in the presidential election. Sure. I mean, he has a broad constituency which is prepared. I mean, you will have. There was a great piece in the New Yorker about 6 months ago about how the country club Republicans flocked to Donald Trump. I mean, they can, and I would put Jack Nicklaus in that group. I mean, they can. You know, he, as you say, the line is, well, he's a bit rough around the edges, but he gets things done, and he's good for people like me. So again, we can tell ourselves all sorts of lies to justify our actions, and I mean, Jack Nicklaus is as good as anybody at doing it. But as I say, I mean, if I'm a PGA Tour golfer, I'm all for, you know, moving to Florida where I don't have to pay, you know, 13% state taxes. There's no state taxes. I'm all for Donald Trump, who gives great tax breaks to rich people. Again, they're just, again, they vote their pocketbook, I guess. So to sum up slightly too neatly, but if I was to sum up your sense, then it's that officially this change on the PGA's behalf is a significant one, and officially, you know, Trump courses are not going to be hosting big tournaments, it would look like, for the foreseeable, but unofficially his supporters very much remain his supporters. Oh, but very much so. The interesting thing as well is staging big championships is very, very important for the brand. I mean, I think Trump bought Turnberry in 2014. Since then, the resort has lost £45 million. In the foreseeable future, there's no way he's getting an Open Championship. I mean, he will have to divest himself of these assets. They're massively loss-making assets. So maybe one day golf won't actually have to face this problem. He'll be gone from golf. But on the other side, the professional golf community will still hang out with Donald Trump. No doubt in my mind about that. One last point, totally separate. I'm just curious for your thoughts on this. Tournament of Champions was on over the weekend in Hawaii. Justin Thomas, in his third round, missed a putt for par, and you know, there's not a golfer listening who hasn't said terrible things to him or herself after missing a putt. But in Thomas's case, he was picked up very clearly on a microphone saying "you F" and homophobic slur followed. And afterwards, I have the audio here. I think he gave what was a fairly ashen-faced and genuine apology after the third round. Just have a listen.
Justin is joining us now. How would you explain what happened on the golf course today, Justin?
It's inexcusable. First off, I just apologize. I mean, there's no excuse. I'm an adult. I'm a grown man. There's absolutely no reason for me to say anything like that. It's terrible. I mean, I'm extremely embarrassed. It's not who I am. It's not the kind of person that I am or anything that I do. But it's unfortunately I did it, and I have to own up to it. And I'm very apologetic.
We learned a lot through adversity. I know it's not been a long time, and you're still digesting this. But what do you think you're going to learn from today?
A lot. I mean, it's like I said, it's inexcusable. I mean, I'm speechless. There's nothing. I found out when I got done on the golf course, or when I got done with my round. I mean, it's bad. There's no other way to put it. I need to do better. I need to be better. It's definitely a learning experience, but yeah, I deeply apologize to everybody and anybody who I offended, and I'll be better because of it.
Okay, so look, that word's clearly in his lexicon. Lawrence, it doesn't just find your mouth at a moment like that unless it's something that you tend to use. I would suspect he may well disagree. So how does the PGA Tour handle this? And like, what of Thomas now? You know, I was kind of surprised. He didn't seem like that sort, you know, seemed like a more enlightened fella.
Well, again, he's a country club boy, you know, came through the college golf system, which is fairly, you know, masculine and toxic to a certain extent. But the thing about Thomas is he's actually, you know, my sense of him is yours, same as your sense. He seems like a pretty decent, you know, grounded guy. And I thought that apology, unlike many apologies I've seen over the years, was pretty sincere. But you ask, you know, what's the PGA Tour going to do about it? The answer is, we'll never know.
Yeah.
Because they have this insane system of not commenting on suspensions and fines and punishments. So we will never know if Justin Thomas gets, you know, banned for a couple of weeks, or if he gets fined £50,000. Again, I have no idea. I'll tell you one thing I do know. I once quoted an LPGA Tour player in The Guardian using a swear word, and she was mad at me, by the way, and she got fined $5,000. I mean, I think the profile of this and Thomas's profile, I mean, he's looking at 50,000 plus, I would imagine, at least something like that. But we'll never know.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.